Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of the National Assembly. This live broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. This afternoon, members of the National Assembly are resuming their regular sittings after a long recess that began on the 15th of April. The members, however, following the demise of Kenya's third president, Mwai Kibaki, held a special sitting on the 27th of April, where they paid respect to the former late President Mwai Kibaki. This day, however, the members will be resuming their regular sitting after the long recess that began on the 15th of April. On the order paper this afternoon, what is lined up for debate is that there are about 3 bills that will be read for the first time on the floor of the National Assembly. There is the Kenya Roads Board Amendment Bill, originating from the National Assembly, Bill number 13 of 2022, that has been tabled by the Chairperson Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The principal object of this bill is to amend Section 6 of the Kenya Roads Board Act 2009 to enable the board to manage the Kenya Roads Fund in a manner that allows it to better finance the construction and maintenance of roads. That is a bill that is scheduled on today's afternoon business. The Kenya Roads Board Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 13 of 2022 by the Chairperson Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing, that will be read for the first time on the floor of the House. There is also the Supreme Court Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 15 of 2022, tabled by the Majority Party leader. It is a bill that will also be read for the first time on the floor of the House. The purpose of this bill is to amend the Supreme Court Act 2011 in order to align it with the current practices of the court and to improve the court's efficiency in the discharge of its duties. A number of sections of the Act have been declared unconstitutional, and there is need to have the same reflected in the Act. This is according to the author of this bill. Furthermore, the court has recommended amendment to the Act in various cases, such as the Commission on Administrative Justice, among others. It is therefore necessary in these circumstances to update the Supreme Court's governing statute. It is a bill that houses 31 clauses that seeks to propose amendments to this particular bill. It is a bill that is being tabled by the leader of Majority Party, Honorable Amos Kimunya, and it is scheduled to be read for the first time on the floor of the House. Some of the clauses that are proposing amendments to this particular bill or the Act, the Supreme Court Act 2011, is that Clause 2 seeks to amend Section 2 of the Act by deleting the definition of Chief Registrar, amending the definition of court and registrar, and inserting new definitions in the Act with respect to petition, proceedings, preliminary procedures, and president. Clause 3 of the bill seeks to amend Section 3, subsection D of the Act to remove the reference to matters relating to the transition from the former constitution to the current one, as these matters will still be catered for even without direct reference. Also lined up to be read for the first time on the floor of the House is the Kenya Revenue Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 24 of 2022, again tabled by the Leader of Majority Party. The Kenya Revenue Authority Amendment Bill seeks to amend the Kenya Revenue
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you've been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come at our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests were committed to our church. Amen. Honourable members, I'm told we don't have quorum. Can you ring the quorum bell?
Simski na huku like ijana mtengeneze screen. Justin Muturi has just ordered that the quorum bell be rung to allow members to get into the chambers. Remember, the House business cannot start before the requisite quorum is achieved. Thereby, the Speaker has ordered for the bell to be rung. It will be rung for 10 minutes to enable members get into the chambers for the business of the day to start. The Supreme Court Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 15 of 2022, that is tabled by the Leader of Majority Party, Honorable Amos Kimunya, will be read for the first time this afternoon. Some of the amendments that are being proposed to this bill, it is a bill that has 31 clauses. Some of the proposals that are being put to this particular act, the Supreme Court Act 2011, that the bill seeks to align in order to align it with the current practices of the court and to improve the court's efficiency in the discharge of its duties. Clause 4 of the bill introduces a new section 3A clarifying the inherent powers of the court to make orders or provide directions for administration of justice where necessary. Clause 5 of the bill repeals Section 4 of the Act and substitutes it with a new Section 4, which provides that a vacancy in the Supreme Court shall not affect the jurisdiction of the court as long as the bench has 5 judges. Clause 6 of this particular bill that seeks to amend the Supreme Court Act 2011 in order to align it with the current practice of the court and to improve the court's efficiency in the discharge of its duties, is that Clause 6 seeks to amend Section 6, Subsection 2 of the Act to provide that in the absence of the Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice, the most senior available judge shall perform any necessary administrative duty. Yes.
Order members, now we have quorum. We can start. Now we have quorum. Yes, start.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Members could take their seats. These ones who are making their way, are they? They look there. All members have two communications. One, a short one, is announcing at the Speaker's Kamkunji. As you are aware, during the afternoon sitting of Thursday, 14th April 2022, several members made requests for an all-members informal meeting, commonly known as the Speaker's Kamkunji, which I acceded to. The meeting was supposed to have happened yesterday, Monday, the 9th of May, but upon request by several members, it was postponed to tomorrow, Wednesday, 11th of May. And therefore, take this opportunity to invite all the members to the Kamukunji tomorrow, Wednesday at 11 a.m. here in the National Assembly chambers upon an earlier adjournment of the House, since it is private members' business day. And the agenda has been circulated by the clerk in the notice to members, and all the members are requested therefore to attend, as there will be in attendance some commissioners, members of the commission from the Senate as well. All members, the second communication, and as I welcome you back to the just concluded recess, it's my hope that you've been able to spend valuable time with your families and constituents, notwithstanding the heightened activities that characterize an election year, and are now rejuvenated enough to proceed with the critical business scheduled for the last part of the 6th session of the 12th Parliament before the House proceeds on Synod year recess. Honourable members, I wish to notify the House of two pending matters that were left in abeyance when I adjourned the House under Standing Order 112, which relates to grave disorder in the House for the long recess on the 14th of April 2022. Ordinarily, honourable members, a House of Parliament is typically calm and operates in a friendly atmosphere in the weeks leading to a Synod year adjournment. I'm certain most honourable members will recall the regrettable and chaotic scenes that were witnessed in this House on the 14th of April, involving the members of Wajir County and Embakasi East, the Honourable Fatuma Gedi, MP, and the Honourable Babu Owino, MP, which were in complete contrast to the norm and expectation. Honourable members, in the case of the member for Wajir County, the Honourable Fatuma Gedi, my guidance was clear to the fact that All she was required to do at the time was to table documents regarding the allegations that she had made on the floor of the House on 12th of April 2022 in accordance with the requirements of Standing Order number 91. You'll also recall that during the said sitting, I also did guide the House on what is the established practice and procedure of the House in considering the admissibility and or authenticity or otherwise of a document tabled in the House, and made reference to the Speaker's guidelines in a number of cases that occurred in the 10th Parliament. In a nutshell, just to refresh the minds of honourable members, in considering the admissibility and or authenticity or otherwise of a document tabled in the House, the Speaker examines the document. One, to determine the following. One, whether the document relates to the matter for which it has been tabled. Two, whether it is signed, and if it is a government document, by the authorized person or persons. Three, bears the emblem or logo of the institution stroke person from which it originated, or coat of arms in the case of documents from government agencies. Four, clearly indicates the author and the person to whom it is addressed. Five, discloses the origin or source of the document. Six, bears certification where a document other than the original is being tabled. Seven, if electronic, whether it has been obtained from a source that does not permit alteration of contents, it is a matter dealing with the rule of admission of electronic evidence. Eight, whether it is related to a claim made before the House or a committee of its content, whether it has a nexus with a claim. And finally, number 9, whether it is stamped and clearly indicates the person signing off the stamp. Honourable members, what I've just highlighted is what I would call the basic rules of determining the admissibility and or authenticity or otherwise of a document tabled in the House. Any document tabled by a member in this House as evidence for substantiation of any allegations made by the member under Standing Order number 91 must hence pass the threshold set by the 9 rules on admissibility. Honourable members, now moving to the issue of Honourable Fatuma Gedi, you will recall that on the material date, that is the 14th of April 2022, the Honourable Member did table several documents, and in particular, attempted to make fresh and further claims and then sought to substantiate them, instead of simply tabling the documents as required. Ordinarily, the standing orders require a member providing evidence in substantiation to a matter claimed in the House to do so within the next sitting day. Given the seriousness of the claims that the member for Wajir County had made on the 12th of April 2022, the Speaker was sufficiently magnanimous, having granted her 2 days to comply with the standing orders. Whenever a member is required to avail evidence to substantiate a claim already made, the sequence of events is that he or she tables the evidence, the Speaker confirms authenticity and admissibility before any member proceeding to make further reference to the paper laid or to use them as evidence. Indeed, there is also the same sequence in a judicial proceeding. However, the Honourable Member failed to comply with this requirement. The Honourable Member therefore forfeited the opportunity to do so as set out by the standing orders. In view of the foregoing, the matter is spent in terms of Standing Order number 91, and there shall be no further substantiation by the member or debate on it. Honourable members, with respect to the documents that were tabled by the Honourable Fatuma Gedi, I note that they consisted of newspaper printouts, photographs, and certified court judgments, or a self-written statement by the Honourable Member, and other uncertified papers. In particular, I note that the court judgment did not bear any certification, and the documents tabled did not also relate to the claims made before the House by the Honourable Fatuma Gedi. Hence, their content lacks a nexus with the claims she made in the House. In this regard, therefore, honourable members, I rule that the documents are inadmissible for failure to meet the threshold set by the rules of admissibility that I have outlined above. Consequently, I direct that the documents tabled by the honourable member during the sitting of the House on 14th of April 2022 be expunged from the records of the House forthwith. I also direct the clerk to return the documents that the honourable member purported to table to her at an appropriate time. To this end, this matter is spent in terms of standing order number 91, and there shall be no further substantiation by the honourable member or further debate on it. Honourable members, allow me to, however, caution all members against making claims or allegations in this House which the claimant cannot substantiate. You will indeed observe the standing order number 91, subsection 2, provides that a member who is unable to substantiate allegations made in the House within the next sitting day is deemed to be disorderly within the meaning of standing order number 107, and hence it will be paramount for a member to be responsible for the accuracy of their statements and any facts which a member alleges or makes and claims to be true. Honourable members, further allow me to also caution members against making allegations which amount to discussing the conduct of a person whose removal from the office requires a decision of this House without a substantive motion. Indeed, you will recall that during the sitting of the House on 14th of April 2022, the member for Yatta, the Honourable Charles Kilonzo, did make reference to the provision of standing order number 87 and reminded the House of the need to propose a substantive motion if a member intends to discuss the conduct of a person whose conduct requires sanction by this House. Honourable members, for avoidance of doubt, standing order number 87, subsection 1, requires that any member who wishes to discuss and or refer adversely to the conduct of a person whose removal from office requires a decision of this House should only do so through a specific substantive motion of which at least 3 days' notice has been given. It is clear from this that the direction the Honourable Fatuma Gedi was taking this House to would circumvent the procedure laid out in standing order number 87 by discussing the conduct of a person without a substantive motion. Honourable members, now moving on to the case of the member for Embakasi East. You recall that on the particular day, I did order the member to withdraw from the chamber for the rest of the day owing to his disorderly conduct. However, the member declined. Honourable members, it was clear that the member's conduct was gross and unbecoming. As you are aware, standing order number 111 provides as follows, and I quote, "If any member shall refuse to withdraw when required to do so, by or under these standing orders, the Speaker or the Chairperson of the committee, as the case may be, having called the attention of the House or committee to the fact that recourse to force is necessary in order to compel such member to withdraw, shall order such member to be removed, and such member shall thereupon, without question put, be suspended from the service of the House for a minimum period of 21 days and a maximum period of 90 days, and shall during such suspension forfeit the right of access to the precincts of Parliament, and the Sergeant-at-Arms shall take necessary action to enforce the order." Close the quote. Honourable members, despite calls from some of you for me to enforce this particular provision, I restrained myself from invoking standing order 111 on that day, and I intend, for purpose of good order, to restrain myself from invoking it even today. However, honourable members, it has not escaped the attention of this House that the member for Embakasi East indeed declined to leave the chamber when he was ordered to do so by the Speaker. Due to the gross disorder that arose in this House thereafter, I deferred my ruling on the member's conduct to today. In this regard, honourable members, I hereby order that the member for Embakasi East, the Honorable Babu Owino Ongili, to withdraw from the chamber and from the precincts of the National Assembly for a period of 5 days inclusive of today on account of gross disorderly conduct pursuant to Standing Order 107A of our standing orders. Honourable members, the Sergeant at Arms is to enforce this order immediately, and if the member is not presently in the chamber, the member shall not be allowed access to the precincts of Parliament or attendance to any committee meetings or parliamentary functions during the 5 days of the suspension. Any committee meeting attended by the member during the 5 days shall be invalid, since the member is now deemed to be a stranger. Further, the member shall not attend committee meetings as a member of the public. Finally, honourable members, may I draw the attention of the House, and in particular to the House leadership on both sides, that this part of the session has 4 weeks comprising of 16 days only, unless the House, by resolution, decides to increase. The following critical business with the statutory timelines will need to be considered and passed by this House within those 4 weeks. Number one being the budget estimate for the financial years 2020-2023, the Appropriations Bill 2022, the Finance Bill 2022, and the County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2022. In addition to these statutory pieces of legislation, honourable members, the House Business Committee has accorded priority to other pieces of legislation, including the Huduma Bill 2021, the Children Bill 2021, the Universities Amendment Bill 2021, the National Disaster Risk Management Bill 2022, the Persons with Disabilities Bill 2021, the Public Finance Management Bill 2022, elections-related regulations from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, debt-related regulations from the National Treasury, as well as a number of individual members' bills and approval of appointments to certain state offices. I may also wish to draw the attention of the House to the fact that the House Business Committee has considered in its today's meeting and approved a proposal that only bills, private members' bills that do not concern county governments will be given priority, since if they concern county governments, as you may well expect, they are likely to die in the other house, even if they are passed by this house. And therefore, to allow members who have legislative proposals that do not concern counties an opportunity to have them considered by the House during this short period. Honourable members, whereas I'm cognizant that politics is now at the center stage due to the forthcoming general elections, members should refrain from bringing to this House their political differences or use the floor of the House to advance their political agendas, hence causing disorder in the House. At this stage of the election cycle, honourable members, politicking should be a preserve of our political rallies and not the floor of the House. Indeed, it will not be possible for the pending business of the House to be considered in a disorderly and chaotic House. Honourable members, allow me to caution that as the representatives of the people, the pending business of the House that I have just highlighted is certainly one which is of huge significance to the people you represent. It is hence paramount that you conclude all the pending business before the House adjourns sine die. Honourable members, I also wish to emphasize that it is incumbent upon the House leadership on both sides to secure the maintenance of decorum in the House. At this end, as your Speaker, and indeed this is the position of the entire Presidium, allow me to reiterate that we shall not allow continuity of a sitting in which disorder and chaos is instigated by the same members who expect the Speaker to marshal and ensure that consideration of such business is expedited. The House is accordingly guided. And with regard to the member for Embakasi East, the Sergeant at Arms is instructed to ensure the member does not gain entry even to Continental House, County Hall, or into the precincts of this compound, even using the Senate gates. Yes, on the number? Yeah, proceed. No, on the members, you know, there's no comment on. No, not on that, not on that. Not on that. It never, you know, I thought you were doing your second term on the board day. No, that one is over. I can give you the communication to read. Yes. Yes, let's move to the next order.
Order number 3, messages.
Order members. Members taking your seats. Take your seats. Take your seats. Take your seats. Honourable members, pursuant to the provision standing under number 42, subsection 2, I wish to report to the House that on Wednesday, 4th May 2022, I received a message from His Excellency the President conveying his nomination of 22 persons for appointment as ambassadors, high commissioners, and permanent representatives. Honourable members, the message conveyed in part that having exercised his powers under the provisions of Article 132, Clause 2, Paragraph E of the Constitution, in seeking the National Assembly's approval of the following persons for appointment to the offices of ambassadors, high commissioners, and permanent representatives to the stations specified hereunder. 1, Mr. Clement Nzomo Kiteme. These are ambassadors. Station Angola. Ms. Mary Mugwanja, Austria. Professor Bitange Demo, Belgium. 4, Mudhoni Geshohi, China. 5, Ambassador Gadhoga Chege, Cuba. 6, Dr. Caroline Wanjiru Karugu, Denmark. 7, Ambassador Salim Salim, Djibouti. 8, Major General A.G. Matiri, Egypt. 9, Ambassador Galma Boru, Indonesia. 10, Mr. Paul Dongo, Mozambique. High Commissioners, number 11, Mr. Michael Sialai, Namibia. 12, Major General Andrew Ikenye, Nigeria. 13, Ms. Margaret Shava, Netherlands. 14, Ms. Amina Abdallah, Sultanate of Oman. 15, Ambassador Nyambura Kamau, Pakistan. 16, Mr. Boniface N. Mwilu, Qatar. 17, Ambassador Michael Oyugi, Spain. 18, Major General retired Thomas Chapkuto, Somalia. 19, Mr. Leonard Boyo, Turkey. 20, Major General retired George Owino, Uganda. Permanent representatives. Number 21, Professor Richard Bosire, Ambassador stroke permanent representative to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, in brackets UNESCO. And finally, 22, Major General retired Charles Getwai, Ambassador stroke permanent representative to the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, in brackets IGAD. Honourable members, you will also recall that on 2nd of February 2022, the House resolved that upon receipt of any name or names of a person or persons nominated for appointment to a state or public office from the President or any other office in the National Executive, the Speaker shall forthwith refer such message to the relevant committee for consideration without having to recall the House. In this regard, honorable members, during the recess period, I did notify all members of receipt of the names and refer the same to the Departmental Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations in accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 45, subsection 1, relating to committee of messages to committees. The committee is required to commence necessary vetting processes as contemplated under the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act and Standing Order number 45, and thereafter table its report for consideration by the House within the statutory timelines. I thank you, honourable members.
Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Leader of the majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. As I lay these papers, allow me also to welcome members back for into this final session, and I hope we will have enough to prosecute. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Tuesday, May the 10th, 2022. One is legal notice number 54 of 2022 relating to the public finance management, public investment management regulations of 2022, and the explanatory memorandum from the National Treasury. Number 2 is annual reports and financial statements in respect to the following institutions for the financial year 2020-2021, and these are the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. That batch is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the following institutions for the year ended 30th of June 2021, and the certificates therein, and these are the Executive Office of the President, the National Gender and Equality Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, the National Treasury, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, CFS, Public Debt Expenditure, State Corporations Appeal Tribunal, the State Department for Public Service, the State Department for Interior and Citizen Services, the State Department for Youth Affairs, and State Department for Gender. The fourth batch is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the following constituencies for the year ended 30th of June 2020, and the certificates therein. And these are Narok South, Ruaraka, Narok East, Mathare, and Awendo. The fifth batch is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the following constituencies for the year ended 30th of June 2019, and the certificates therein, and these are Bahati, Narok West, Narok North. And the sixth batch is the reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect to the Office of the Auditor General management letter for the years 30th of June 2019 and 30th of June 2020, and the certificates therein. And lastly is the reports of the Auditor General financial statements in respect of the Baringo Technical College for the years ended 30th of June 2017, 30th of June 2018, and 30th of June 2019, and the certificates therein. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The next, the Chairman, Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. A member, who is it?
Udege Nyatike. Huh? Udege Nyatike MP.
Oh, the member for Nyatike?
Yes.
Oh, great. Proceed.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Tuesday, May 10, 2022. Report on the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on its consideration of the Persons with Disability National Assembly Bill number 61 of 2021. I thank you.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements. Order number 8, the Kenya Roads Board Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 13 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Kenya Roads Board Act 2009 and for connected purposes. Order number 10, the Kenya Revenue Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 24 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act 1995 to make consequential amendments to other statutes and for connected purposes. Order number 11.
No.
Order number 9, the Supreme Court Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 15 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Supreme Court Act and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the Persons with Disabilities Bill, National Assembly Bill number 61 of 2021, second reading.
Leader Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Persons with Disabilities Bill, being National Assembly Bill number 61 of 2021, be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, let me start by thanking the Committee on Labor and Social Services because when we committed this bill to them, they made it a priority and were able to bring in the report which has just been tabled. And I do hope that members will agree with the committee because the issues are as contained within this bill. Honorable Speaker, the primary purpose of this bill is really to modernize the current law that relates to persons with disabilities, noting that the current law that we have was last updated in, is actually the Persons with Disabilities Act number 14 of 2003. So we are almost 19 years into when the last law for relating to the people with disabilities was done, and yet so many events have taken place which I'll be enumerating. We also know it has several deficits and loopholes, partly also to do with the requirements within the Constitution that came in 2010 and which has not been updated. Honorable Speaker, according to the 2019 census, which is the only document that we have, the Kenya Population and Housing Census, it lists that there are about 2.2% of all Kenyans have a form of disability, with the most prevalent types, of course, being disabilities to do with mobility and capacity related. And hence, when you look at the population we are talking of, this bill comes into this House with an intention of catering for approximately 1.5 million Kenyans. I know we keep hearing of a number that there are 6.5 people with disabilities represented in this House, but the only record I can find is the census of 2019, which puts that number at approximately 1.5 million Kenyans. And I don't believe that between 2019 and now, the number of people with disability has increased exponentially to actually come to the 6.5. But we have 1.5 million Kenyans we need to take care of. In this regard, this bill recognizes all rights and entitlements of these people in this special category. These rights, again borrowing from the Constitution, are basically the right to equality and non-discrimination. We have the right to legal capacity, the right to marry and form a family, the right to privacy, the right to physical and mental integrity, in addition to all these other bills. But these specific ones are relevant to this group of persons. Additionally, the bill spells out some rights and entitlements unique to persons with disabilities, including the right not to be dismissed on account of any form of disability, and also the right to independent living, the right to participate in sports and recreation within a situation where there are no barriers to that participation, and several others that will be captured. Now, putting this into perspective, Honorable Speaker, since the enactment of the current Act in the year 2003, some developments that I made mention include, in 2008, Kenya became a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that is the 2006 CPRD, which established transformative norms and standards on the rights of persons with disabilities. Then in 2010, the Constitution of Kenya was promulgated, again including specific and robust provisions covering the rights of persons with disabilities. Then in 2015, the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities issued its initial concluding observations to Kenya, making a number of recommendations on how our great republic should ensure the rights of persons with disabilities. And finally, in January of this year, just about 5 months ago, Kenya deposited its instrument of ratification on the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Africa 2008, which is referred to as the Disability Rights Protocol, which affirms the rights of persons with disabilities on the continent. Honorable Speaker, the National Council for Persons with Disabilities indicates that there have been numerous unsuccessful attempts to have this bill, but both protracted and lengthy stakeholder consultations have been a big hindrance, and I'm happy that at long last, people have realized you can only overanalyze a situation until you paralyze it. And this is one of those situations where so much analysis and everyone wanting their say in this bill was leading to becoming, putting a disability on the bill, moving into the next level. But at last we have managed to extract it from that, and the committee has fast-tracked, and we now have a bill. And I'm sure, especially because this bill does not need to go to the Senate, and I would urge members, even as we process this bill, we take special cognizance for any amendments members would want to bring that would end up leading this bill to go to the Senate, because we don't have the luxury of that time. So we confine matters to matters that can be conversed and finished within this House without affecting the governance and whatever of county government, which will lead this bill to go to the Senate. And we don't want to get that, because 19 years is such a long period for people with disabilities waiting for a bill that is at par with the current laws, and we don't want to deny them that opportunity at this point. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the international stage, Kenya has in the past been hailed for being up to date with the adoption of progressive policies. And in 2018, the United Kingdom, the Department for International Development, which is within the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, did, together with the International Disability Alliance, and the government of Kenya, host the first Global Disability Summit in London, and which had brought together both the state and non-state actors. And it's during this summit the representatives of the government made several commitments, including the ratification of various protocols and amending our law to keep pace with the changing circumstances. And I did mention earlier that just this January, one of those protocols was ratified as part of this commitment. Now, I believe that part of the reason our country stands out in the community of nations is because not only because of our industry, but also because we are a progressive nation committed to upholding the highest standards of human dignity. And indeed, I do recall in the last two national days that we have attended, His Excellency the President has been very clear in terms of articulating why we need to remove our people from, or get rid of the indignities that they go through indignities of seclusion, indignities of poverty, indignities of fear, and for people with disabilities, we're talking of liberating them from the indignities of discrimination and bringing them to the dignity of inclusivity within the larger community. So, Honorable Speaker, then, enacting this bill will be one of the ways of living up to this, our standard that we set for ourselves, and offering the best environment for all Kenyans to operate, and most importantly, earn a living within a dignified environment, and where nobody is discriminated on account of being physically different or than what we used to, what we call the normal person versus the person who is not, who are able differently, as the various things are people call the different nomenclatures. So, Honorable Speaker, although this bill seeks to amend the 2003 Act, it is intentionally and purposely drafted to retain the progressive provisions of the current Act. So we're not just getting rid of the Act, the current Act as it is. Again, most of the provisions of the current Act are retained, but again, updated as far as possible. For example, the administrative institution, which is the National Council of Persons with Disability, and which has played a key role in advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities, has been retained in the bill. Additionally, it has also retained the incentives that are given to private employers who offer employment to the persons with disability. And most importantly, all the reliefs and the tax incentives that were given in terms of tax exemptions that are being given to people living with disability, including access to credit, preferential access to credit, have also been retained. So we are not losing anything in terms of what we already have as of 2003, but it's now being brought into a situation where we can have a modern law in line with the Constitution, and that will respond to issues that have risen between 2003 and to date. It's in this regard then, Honorable Speaker, that I wish to urge members of this House to support this bill as a show of their support and empathy to our brothers and sisters who are living with disabilities in our great republic, and to ensure that they are also mainstreamed into the larger society. Honorable Speaker, with those remarks, I beg to move, and I would wish to ask the Honorable Tom Ondege, on behalf of, the Vice Chair is here. I hadn't seen him, but the Honorable Gideon Koske, the Vice Chair of the Committee on Labor and Social Services, to second.
Honorable Koske, for Chepalu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. On behalf of the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, it's my pleasure and privilege and honor to second the second reading of the Persons with Disabilities Bill number 61 of 2021, which was established on the 1st December 2021. The bill was committed to the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, pursuant to the Standing Order 121 on 22nd February 2022 for consideration, including conducting public participation. Honorable Speaker, the committee observed that 4 significant events in the last 2 decades necessitated a review of the existing law on PWDs. First, it was in 2008. Kenya became a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2006, which established transformation norms and standards on the rights of persons with disabilities. And in 2010, Honorable Speaker, the Constitution of Kenya was promulgated, including specific and robust provisions covering the rights of persons living with disabilities. And in 2015, Honorable Speaker, the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities issued its initial concluding observation to Kenya, making multiple recommendations on how Kenya should ensure the rights of persons with disabilities. And finally, in January 2022, Kenya deposited its instrument of ratification on the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of persons with disabilities in Africa 2018, which affirms and constitutionalizes the rights of persons with disabilities on the continent. Honorable Speaker, the law must be anchored on the social model of disability, which recognizes that it is the society that disables the individuals by failing to address physical, social, and economic barriers. The language and terms of art used in the law must abide by minimum standards of accepted usage, thereby ensuring effective communication and avoiding repetitive ableism and stigmatization. Honorable Speaker, the bill intends to tighten the weak points in policy and seal caps that pose enforcement to strengthen the legislative framework relating to PWDs. The bill also establishes a clear framework for exercising human rights by persons with disabilities and their full participation in all spheres of life, including political, social, and economic fields. Honorable Speaker, the committee, having considered the Persons with Disability Bill 2021, Bill number 61 of 2021, recommends that the bill be agreed to, subject to the amendments in the report. I beg to second, and I thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable members, honourable members, honourable members. Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that the Persons with Disabilities Bill, National Assembly Bill number 61 of 2021, be now read a second time. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this bill. So, Speaker, this is an extremely important bill for this country. I know we already have a bill, an act of 2014 that is dealing with matters of disability. But, Mr. Speaker, this bill, apart from just strengthening that act, it also aligns with the new requirements that arise from Article 54 of our current constitution, so that it's actually aligning the act with the constitution. Mr. Speaker, all the issues that relate to the issues with disability actually are in one way or another linked to access. And the problems of disabilities this country is big. We have about 1.5 to 2 million people that have one form of disability or another. And Mr. Speaker, these are members of our society, but we must look after, that we must treat with dignity and in all ways, despite their disability. And in the past, Mr. Speaker, this has not been possible. There are cases where even persons with disability have actually been hidden from the society and therefore denied all activities that are within the society. And if you look at it, Mr. Speaker, the biggest issue is that of access. Many of us who are able-bodied may not actually appreciate the problem of access for persons with disability, starting from just issues of physical access, how you get into buildings, how you get into vehicles, how you use public toilets, how you go into high-rise buildings. And Mr. Speaker, even using lifts, where there are lifts, there are still problems of access. Mr. Speaker, we may not realize the problems of access, for example, with people with a disability in hearing, how they actually participate in all activities, even in politics. Mr. Speaker, that is a problem with them. Mr. Speaker, if you think of people who are visually handicapped, how they go about, how they participate, and all these, Mr. Speaker, need to be addressed in law. And although the Act of 2003 addresses this, there are gaps that need to be filled. Mr. Speaker, persons with disability are actually subject to discrimination in many ways, sometimes in subtle forms, even in our language, even how we treat them, even how we relate with them, even how we give them access to public functions. Mr. Speaker, it is actually a big problem. Mr. Speaker, even the right to property, sometimes people don't get their property because basically they're disabled, and then they're taken advantage of. Mr. Speaker, persons with disability are subjected to a high form of stigma. Many times, some actually decide not even to participate in all activities of the society because of the way they are treated. Arrangements, even if you go to meetings, arrangements, even if you go to functions, nobody thinks that how shall we get the persons with disability to participate. Even when they are able to participate, they are not treated with dignity. The amount of indignity that they suffer is actually great. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill because I know this bill actually addresses all these issues that are facing the persons with the disability. Mr. Speaker, Part 2 of this bill sets out very clearly what these rights should are. They sets out that there should be no discrimination, the legal capacity should be addressed, the right to family, the right to privacy, and the right to health care. Even if the health facilities are available, can persons with disability actually access them? And that same Part 2 also brings the issue of a barrier-free environment. I know some of us may not even realize that even when you go into lifts and you find Braille in the lifts, you get the lifts talking, they think it's just an advancement of technology. Those are actually the rights of persons with disability and the persons who have disability of hearing, so that they can use those facilities. And I support that it actually brings that, the bill brings that out very carefully and provides provisions. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides for the council. We have a council already, but at least it needs to be strengthened, and it is how the council is appointed, how people are appointed, the qualifications that are needed. But more importantly, in relation to the council, prior to this bill coming into effect, if it is passed, actually the council has only offices in Nairobi. And if you expect persons with disability to travel from all over the country to get the issues addressed at the council, that is actually a form of discrimination. So this bill provides that the council will have offices in various parts of the countries, in the counties and so on. So that is extremely important. So Speaker, this bill, I support it because it also provides incentives. Look at the areas of tax. Mr. Speaker, it is important that the persons with the disabilities sometimes use materials that we don't use. And if these materials are taxed, we actually then subject to higher tax. So this bill addresses that we can have tax exemption on the materials that are used by persons with disability, on the materials that are used to manufacture items used by persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, if you look at, even if they have their businesses, I think we should give consideration in terms of taxation. The process as it has been before, getting somebody to be certified and registered has been a bit complex, and I think this bill attempts to promote that. Mr. Speaker, this bill rightly links with the country, but the mover, the leader of government business, indicated that if we then bring those ones in, it may then take the bill to the Senate. So probably we'll have to look, but that's a very important function. Even if we exclude them because we want the bill to pass, later on we must have amendments that will bring them up, because people with disabilities actually live in the counties. So the convenience of passing the bill should not surpass the convenience of getting the right thing done. Mr. Speaker, if you look at this bill has created a schedule. And Schedule 1 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is actually, in my view, the most important part of this bill. It has put into place in private institutions, in public institutions, in public transport. It has put the requirements that are needed. I know many of us may not appreciate how do people with disability, particularly physical disability involving the limbs, how do they get into a bus? How do they get into a train? How do they come off a train? Now, this bill makes provision. For example, I think we must have bus stops where actually there are platforms, and we must actually go for buses that actually have a flat bottom, which is aligned with the stage, so that somebody with a wheelchair can just wheel them in. Inside the buses, there actually should be a space or two where the person with disability will go in. So, Mr. Speaker, these are extremely important. And therefore, we must also align this with international standards, so that when we have persons with disability in Kenya, the facilities they use here must be exactly the same as the facilities they will meet when they go to other countries. So, Mr. Speaker, we must have in the building regulations. This cannot just be said, put in regulations and left to implement themselves. Other laws, even the building laws, will have to be amended so that these requirements of persons with disabilities are interred in the law, and that buildings can only be approved as habitable if they involve these facilities. Mr. Speaker, with that, I support this bill, and we look at the amendments when the time comes in the Committee of the Whole House to actually strengthen it further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Shamala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to say that I welcome wholeheartedly this bill on the persons with disabilities bills. The reason being that indeed people with disabilities are extremely discriminated against in this country. And we're talking about over 1.5 million people. And the dignity, and I've said it time and time again, the right to dignity is the platform of all rights. When the time comes at the committee stage, I have noted, and some of these things or amendments could come through regulations, but it is my personal desire to see them entrenched in legislation, that issues such as service dogs for the blind are allowed into all public buildings. There are certain areas, certain public places which will not allow dogs. And we're not talking about pets, but the seriousness of service dogs for people who are visually impaired. It is with these few remarks, Mr. Speaker, that I support this bill.
Member for Makueni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, this bill does not concern the counties as it is now, but when it comes to its implementation, Obviously, the counties will have a very great role to play, especially in modification of buildings, because most of that law is generated from the counties, and I believe in one way or another, the counties have a role to play. But for now, we need this law urgently. Many people with disabilities have suffered in this country. Mr. Speaker, the experiences I have in Makueni County is that we have children with disabilities who are hidden by parents or people who live with them, and they never get an opportunity to go to school or to have their rights as now protected in the Constitution and in this bill could be protected. Under the previous law did not cover that well, nor does the current law cover that well. So I thought really we have something to do. Mr. Speaker, also people with disabilities have been mistreated by people who stay with them. Some have been locked up. I'm aware of one case whereby a person with a disability had sort of gotten depression, and when the no more people are leaving the home, they will lock up in chains this particular person with disability till those people come back. This law is also talking about food, access to food and water, and people with disability have also been denied that if they are not able to help themselves and they've been abandoned for the day, then they'll end up without food and water. But the most important thing is how do we implement this law? How do we make sure that people who break the law, as far as the people with disabilities or who abuse their rights, are dealt with properly? What is the system of getting the evidence to the police and to the prosecutor, the special prosecutor I've seen in this case? Most probably, we could also come up with special courts dealing with this, or some of the special courts were already in existence, like children, deal with these particular people. So although the people who are drafting this law have done a very good job, there's a lot of work to be done at third reading so that we can improve this law and make sure it serves the people with the disability better. The people with disability also, Mr. Speaker, have gone a lot of, rejection under the system which is in place. And the money is implemented by the national government, the identification, the infrastructure put by the national government to the country, and also the council which has been existing have not been very tight. There has been a lot of corruption in that system. Skills have not been impacted properly, especially for the poor people with disability, poor children with disability, and a lot of time they are left at the mercy of well-wishers in children homes. And actually the Member of Parliament has a very big role to play when it comes to dealing with people with disability. And a lot of times a Member of Parliament has to chip in here and there or mobilize well-wishers to visit different children homes where people with disability are in school or they're going through training. And I think one thing which should be stressed is the skills for people with disabilities, to make sure every person has access to education, has access to skills, and can be able to earn a living, and also has access to medication. Because some of the people with disabilities have been treated, they have managed to be treated, and others have gained it through accidents, Mr. Speaker. I have a case in Makueni where somebody was working in one of the cement companies, and something went wrong in the processes, and the hot cement was sprayed in their eyes, and he became blind. And ever since, he's been living with disability, and there is no effort to make him see again medically. And it is not possible. So that person is already living with a disability. One of the issues also which has not been handled very well in this is those people who pretend to have become disabled or have disability, and they begin to enjoy privileges which people with disabilities enjoy. And again, those privileges have not been put properly in this law. They are still left scattered in some administrative process somewhere or in the regulations of other acts of parliament, making it difficult to implement the goodies in the Constitution for people with disability. So when you look at it in totality, It's a very, very important law. This is a very big move so far. It is going to assist the implementation and the education to people living with people with disability, or people who acquire disability already when they are mature. And coming back to those who probably are recovering from an accident, have pretended to be disabled, have started enjoying those privileges, have recovered. There's no mechanism of getting to identify and moving them back to where they are. Unfortunately, this law, Mr. Speaker, is being discussed when our good friend, the Honorable Sankok, is not here, who is a member of parliament living with disability and has been part of the system of assisting people with disability in this country. Unfortunately, as all of us know, he lost his son, and is handling that matter, and we really want to, on my part, and I believe many members want to say Paula to him and condole with him, but he would have given it very serious input as a person who has been affected and has been practicing these already and knows where the loopholes are. And I believe we'll be back by the time we do the third reading, so that he can help us get into some of the details which could help the House serve the people with disability better, and not leave the total responsibility to a member of parliament without resources and without a proper plan on how the national government is going to help the people with disability. Otherwise, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support and urge members to do so. I thank you.
Honorable Danita Gatti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to confirm and to say that I welcome and support the Persons with Disabilities Bill of 2021, and I want to thank the committee, Mr. Speaker, for the effort that they have put into this work, Mr. Speaker, to come up with this bill. Mr. Speaker, issues persons with disabilities in this country date back, Mr. Speaker, to I don't know when, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of parliament of this House have persons with disabilities as their voters and as their people, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am happy because we are talking about persons who live in our constituencies and in our wards, Mr. Speaker, and who vote to keep us here as members of parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, I support that the committee has thought it wise to actually repeal the Persons with Disabilities Act and to actually strengthen it. The PWD's Act of 2003, Mr. Speaker, I'm very much conversant with it. Mr. Speaker, I am a candidate of disability, as you are aware, and Mr. Speaker, I have seen firsthand how persons with disabilities of this country and of the world are treated, Mr. Speaker, than any other persons, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am here to also say that I support, because I do represent persons with disabilities, and in my capacity, Mr. Speaker, in this House, as the president of the Commonwealth Parliamentarians with Disabilities Network, and say, Mr. Speaker, that we as a country are doing well. We are trying, Mr. Speaker, comparatively on matters disability. And I want to applaud this country, Mr. Speaker, on the amount of work that we have done. Mr. Speaker, sir, the challenges that continue to face persons with disabilities in this country, Mr. Speaker, starting with the mere fact that, Mr. Speaker, accessibility continues to be a problem. Mr. Speaker, unless you are disabled in this country, you will not understand what it means to look for accessibility. And Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that this bill is seeking to actually talk about accessibility. And accessibility is not just about physical accessibility into a building. It is about information, Mr. Speaker, any form of accessibility that we may want to access. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is seeking to address what we have been having in terms of the challenges of accessibility. Mr. Speaker, sir, unemployment, Mr. Speaker, which this bill is seeking to address. Mr. Speaker and my colleagues in this House, the biggest challenge for persons with disabilities in Kenya is unemployment. Mr. Speaker, persons with disabilities are not employed. Persons with disabilities do not have jobs, Mr. Speaker. They are not trained, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, their lives are not well just like any other person, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy that this bill is seeking to actually decriminalize, Mr. Speaker, any employer, Mr. Speaker, who actually dismisses persons with disabilities based on disability. Mr. Speaker, and that is why we are saying, Mr. Speaker, if you look at this Article 70, which actually says no person shall on the ground of disability deny a person with disability employment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of all the poor Kenyans in this country, 90% are persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we are trying as a country, but Mr. Speaker, we must actually work hard to ensure that persons with disabilities are actually taken care of. Mr. Speaker, we are in a space and at a time when we are doing our own elections, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I am happy that this bill is seeking, Mr. Speaker, to say that no person with disability shall be denied a right to participate in the political process, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, even if we are talking like that in this bill, look at how many persons with disabilities are even participating in the political process. Mr. Speaker, it is not good. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am happy that if you look at Article 29, where we are talking about the civic and political rights of persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, most of our persons with disabilities are denied these rights, Mr. Speaker. Of all the rights in this country, this right to participate in civic and political rights is a right that is denied. And Mr. Speaker, Article 29 says that every person with disability has a right to participate in political and public life and the opportunity to enjoy them on an equal basis of others. But Mr. Speaker, if you look at the just results that we have had of nominations, persons with disabilities have not participated. So Mr. Speaker, we have a duty to continue to enhance the lives of our persons with disabilities in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, from where I sit in the Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, you will remember, obviously, Mr. Speaker, that in 2018, Kenya and the UK co-hosted the first Global Disability Summit. And Mr. Speaker, those are the commitments that continue to shape this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, our country has ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to give effect, Mr. Speaker, to the commitment that Kenya must make it possible for persons with disabilities to participate not only in social issues, Mr. Speaker, but also in economic and political sphere. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am glad that we are looking at this bill. Mr. Speaker, we now have the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Mr. Speaker, for a long time, disability in this country has been a national issue. Now, Mr. Speaker, through the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, every constituency and every county is going to have an office of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, meaning, Mr. Speaker, that we are living within the provisions of the Constitution that says that disability must devolve. So, Mr. Speaker, when you are saying that disability must devolve, we therefore must ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we also channel our budgets and our economic affairs, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that disabled people who live in our communities and in our wards and in our villages, Mr. Speaker, are able to be supported, Mr. Speaker. And I want this House to know that persons with disabilities are called persons with disabilities, not persons living with disabilities, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I speak in this August House today, Mr. Speaker, I am happy on behalf of the Kenyans with disabilities that I represent that, Mr. Speaker, this August House of 2022 now, this May, Mr. Speaker, is actually looking at the issue of persons with disabilities bill, Mr. Speaker. This has been a long document. This has been a journey for persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, to be able to present themselves, to be able to live a dignified life, Mr. Speaker, because we are candidates of disability, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, for me, as a member of parliament representing persons with disabilities, I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, this is a huge day for them because we are discussing persons with disabilities issues in this House, me included, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, at the third reading, I will bring amendments, Mr. Speaker, that will go into strengthening this bill, Mr. Speaker, to ensuring that persons with disabilities continue. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you because, Mr. Speaker, if this is your last session as a Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we'll say we discussed this bill, Mr. Speaker, in this House, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad that we are actually discussing such an important matter on behalf of the millions of persons with disabilities in this House. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, our budget must translate to what we are talking about disability matters when it comes to those issues, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Member for Tharaka.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, allow me to rise and support this bill. And before I make any comments, also allow me to pass my words of condolences to the leader of people with disabilities, the Honorable Sankok, for the tragic accident where he lost his son. May they be consoled, and may the dear son rest in everlasting peace. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill. The main reason being that for a long time, we have treated people living with disabilities as semi-human. We have been considering them to be half persons, and this is one reason why, especially in the African culture, they are given strange names, even in Kiswahili like Kiwete, which really is demeaning and dehumanizing. Therefore, in spite of the fact that we need moral obligations to ensure that we treat people with disabilities as human beings like any other, with the full human rights like any other persons, it's also important to address those rights, obligations, liabilities into law, which can be relied on in the future to ensure that these persons are actually protected. So this law is timely. I would urge the House to pass it. And when it comes to establishing offices to cater for persons with disabilities, I will be urging the government to ensure that my constituency, Tharaka, has such an office, and that we are able to treat the people with disabilities in that constituency as full human beings and not as semi-humans, as most people strive to do. This is a very good law, which begins with recognizing the rights of persons with disabilities, and we have a whole part 2, which consists of over 28 sections dealing with what are the rights of persons with disabilities. And right from the beginning, where they have right to equality and non-discrimination, to right to privacy, to right to human dignity, right to education, right to health and sports culture, civic and political rights, and every other right that they have. These are rights derived from the Constitution, which deals with the fundamental human rights. And when we reduce this into statute, it means we are protecting these persons living with disabilities. Importantly, we also have provisions dealing with enforcement of those rights so that we do not mistreat persons with disability and get away with it. The person who tries to do this should actually face the full force of the law as provided in this particular law. From there, we are establishing the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, a revision of what we have today and from the previous law of 2003, such that this council, which will have more powers than it has always had, will be taking care of persons who have been registered with the council as members, and also who actually profess the fact that they require protection under this law. This is one area which is part 3 of the law, which we must look into to ensure that it is strengthened. And this council is able to fully take care of persons with disabilities, including enforcement of their fundamental rights and fundamental rights and whatever else, whatever the right they have. Then from there we have part 4, which deals with the reliefs and the incentives. This is to ensure that persons with disabilities are well taken care of, and that persons who have such people living with them are able to take care of them if given exemptions and incentives. Exemptions would be what they are exempted from, including taxes, including other incentives, which will make us provide for even children with a disability going to school, such that from now henceforth, we should have reliefs for these children. When a child with a disability goes to school, the levies that are charged by the school, the levies that are charged by the government, including universities, should either be waived totally or there is a substantial reduction so that these persons are able to acquire the necessary education. Then we have part 5 that deals with the relationship between the national government and county governments on the matters of disability. And this is why possibly there will be necessity of this law going into the Senate. But that notwithstanding whether that happens or it doesn't, the fact remains that some of these rights, according to persons with disabilities, are rights that fall under the devolution chapter of our Constitution and have to be enforced by the county governments. It is therefore important that the county governments are informed of their obligations when they are dealing with the persons with the disabilities, including a provision in the Constitution, a provision in the procurement laws that persons with disabilities have to get certain percentages of contracts, either in the national government and in the county governments. This is an obligation that falls squarely under the county governments, because we know for sure what happens in county governments sometimes cannot be accounted for, and sometimes it's what we would term as blatant breach of the law when it comes to dealing with either gender issues or persons with disabilities. Part 6 is quite important because it deals with the offenses and penalties, and this is important because, as we said, there is a whole host of a chapter with rights of these persons. What happens to persons who decide to breach those particular rights? What obligations do they have? And where they commit criminal offenses, what penalties are they likely to be faced with? It is important to notice that it's an offense to discriminate against persons with disabilities. It is also an offense that we cannot abuse or exploit or use violence against persons with disabilities. It has also now become an offense to conceal persons with disabilities. What we've been told that sometimes, especially in the African culture, we find it a little bit shameful to expose persons with disabilities to strangers, or in the name of, this is maybe a Kiwete, and therefore I do not wish my visitors to see that I have such a person. It will now become an offense if you conceal such a person, and especially from the authorities that fall under the National Council. It is also an offense to treat persons with disabilities in a degrading manner, in a manner that lowers their dignity as human beings, in a manner that shows that you are trying to treat that person as semi-human. If anybody does this, then that becomes an offense and it is punishable by the law. And the penalties that are prescribed, some of them are quite prohibitive, which is what good law should actually do. Then we have miscellaneous provisions, including the general penalty clause, which is section 78, and the other provisions, which in my view do buttress the fact that Kenya now wants to treat persons with disabilities with the dignity they deserve and accord those persons the protection of the law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do support.
Member for Nyaribari Church.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to support this noble bill. I start from the onset, Honorable Speaker, to share with my colleagues who have supported it and said that it's a noble bill meant to address the challenges our people are facing. Honorable Speaker, I come from a community where historically people were disabled, were considered a curse to the family, and the unthinkable was done on them, keeping them in the house, hiding them from the public, and that injured their capacity, their development was injured in the process, Honorable Speaker, because they were not given a chance to go to school. So this bill in many ways addresses those issues and those cultural barriers which have hurt the community, which have hurt Kenyans so much, because, Honorable Speaker, we have had a chance of seeing people who have disability, who have excelled and excelled very well in their field. Some of them have become the best artists in the world. Some of them have become the best educationists. Some of them they have become best lawyers, and they make all that they can be, a normal person can do, they also do it as well. So, Honorable Speaker, this bill in many ways addresses those issues and those challenges. And as a member of Parliament from Nyaribari Chache, Honorable Speaker, I think it's in order for us to enrich this bill a lot more than where we have done it, because there are many issues we need to address, Honorable Speaker. Like this weekend, I had people who came to see me, and part of the group were some disabled people, and they were never given a chance to, because of the crowd and because they cannot fight for attention like the normal person would, they miss out on opportunities where nature demands that you have to use force. And those people, we must get away, Honorable Speaker, of helping them out. As a community, as a country, we must address their unique needs by way of ensuring that the law protects them from those vagaries of nature, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, have things in mind, simple things like the wheelchair. Honorable Speaker, wheelchairs are necessarily very expensive, and these people cannot afford, Honorable Speaker. They cannot be disabled, they cannot suffer from disability, and also we disable them by way of not giving them the support that they need to have a chance of starting ahead of the queue, Honorable Speaker. Because if we don't do that, Honorable Speaker, almost 5% of Kenyans will be injured permanently, and to that extent, our country will be reducing their capacity of production by almost 5%. If you look at the multiplier effect, Honorable Speaker, then we are speaking of a bigger percentage than the 5%, which we are denying an opportunity because of the inability or because of the able differently. They are not given a chance to use their God-given talents to excel. Honorable Speaker, I've seen a very interesting scenario where if you are disabled, you only reduce it to a shoemaker. You know, the best the parents can do, or the community, is to give you a chance to go and run to become a shoemaker or repairing of shoes. And yet, these are people whose mind has not been injured in any way. They can do a lot more than making shoes, Honorable Speaker. These are people who are empowered, just like any one of us. It's just that they don't have an opportunity to go through a normal school, which will then give them the skills and empower them to be able to compete with every other person in the society. Honorable Speaker, we need to address this and address it with a lot of concern, because all of us are potential disabled people. It's a question of time, Honorable Speaker. We have seen our colleagues in Parliament here who are once very, very strong people, and I want to use the words of Honorable Danita Ngatia, who she used it, and I'm grateful she has given herself as an example. Honorable Speaker, in the last Parliament, she came here as a normal person. Not that she's abnormal now, but she was walking on her feet, doing everything as a normal person. But because of nature and the way God conspires and gets his things done, now she's on a wheelchair. She has lived in both worlds. She knows what it means to be disabled. She knows what it means to be treated as a normal person. And when I listen to her, and I tend to listen to her so keenly, she has a testimony, and a testimony which we need to listen to if we have to make Kenya a better place. And Honorable Speaker, all of us have a duty and a responsibility of ensuring that if Kenya becomes a better country than we found it, Honorable Speaker. And these are some of the issues, these are some of the laws we must put in place to ensure that those kind of discrimination, Honorable Speaker, that we see on a daily balance should never be allowed in our society, because these are good people who should be given an opportunity to do that which God has given them the capacity to do it. So to address those issues, Honorable Speaker, my proposal, and I shared with the Committee of Rep on this issue, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that we have free education for people with disability. I know there are levels of disabilities. Not everybody is as completely incapable of helping himself. We need to get a way of percentaging, giving a percentage on what it is we can qualify, or what percentage one qualifies to get 100% support from the government. If a disabled person is willing to go to school, Honorable Speaker, we should be able to give them an incentive, not just an incentive of saying a discount or giving some token, kind of support. We truly need to go out of our way and give them a chance. If a disabled child passes in high school from primary and they are called into a national school or whichever school it is, they should get 100% support from the government. If they pass from high school to college, whichever college it is, we should be able to give them 100% support, Honorable Chairman, Honorable Speaker, because that way, then we are going to use them as a model to inspire other disabled children who are otherwise looking down upon themselves and wondering, why me? Why did God allow this to happen to me? And yet I can see other people who are normal doing their normal thing, Honorable Speaker. So I appeal is that helping us, and I think it's coming timely. It's never too late to change what we must change. And I think we are going to help the country by this extent by ensuring that the bill addresses those issues. But when it comes when it comes again, we should be able to amend it and enrich it and make it better, so that we capture everything else that has not been captured, to ensure that our children, our disabled people who have been able differently are given a decent treatment in the society, to ensure that they're also able to contribute to our tax revenue, just like any other normal person would have done, Honorable Speaker. With those few words, I support.
Member for Kitui Central.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in really appreciating this bill and what it intends to do, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have international instruments and we have also our local laws which support the issue of disability, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, anytime we discuss these issues, I get very encouraged as a Kenyan, Honorable Speaker, because Kenya as a country, we have actually done well, although there is room for improvement. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the statistics, it's only about 1.5 million people who are disabled differently. And when you look at the total population, this translates to less than 3% in this country. But when you look at the awareness about disability in this country, Honorable Speaker, you realize that every Kenyan is actually very much aware about issues disability. And that's why I get very encouraged, Honorable Speaker. Something which encourages me a lot, Honorable Speaker, is when I look at our own who are in this house, who are enabled differently. And I want to single out a few of them, Honorable Speaker. Look at Honorable Danita Ngati, who is the chair of the network of people living with disability, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Honorable Speaker, look at what she has managed to do. Look at our own, Honorable Janet Stenay, who is the local chair, the chapter on Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians in this country. Look at our own Honorable Rose Museo, the County Women Rep Makueni, and what she has managed to do. Look at our own Tim Wanyonyi, Honorable Speaker. These are very good cases of demonstrating what our colleagues, that our colleagues are only enabled differently. And Honorable Speaker, you know, the other day, yesterday I was actually watching sports. There's something happening in Brazil now. They are calling it deaf. It's like Olympics for the deaf. And when I watched these colleagues of ours and the way they performed, Honorable Speaker, you get very encouraged. And that's why I think as a country, what we should be doing is just to provide opportunities for these colleagues of ours. Because I think they are gifted in different ways. They can really excel in their different areas. And that's why this bill becomes very important. Because what we are doing with this bill, Honorable Speaker, we are providing the legal framework so that they are able now to get that opportunity and really shine, do their best. So, Honorable Speaker, I really want to support this bill and say this, Honorable Speaker. For me, I'm a believer of what we call integration, so that other than seeing them as different teams, They are integrated into the society. And that's why, Honorable Speaker, in terms of our education policy, this is an area we have done very well. Because, Honorable Speaker, you realize now what is happening in our primary schools is we don't have different streams for people living with disability. They actually integrate, they are part of the main, they are going to the same class with those who are enabled with our normal children. They are doing things the same, and in that way they feel like there is a sense of belonging, so that they don't see themselves differently. That's another good area, another really area we've done well, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think the other thing which you need to look at is the issue of how we are supporting these people who are enabled differently. Honorable Speaker, in my own constituency, I have two institutions. I have one which you call School for the Mentally Handicapped. Those who have mental issues. I have another one which is School for the Deaf. Those who are not able to talk, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, you realize because they are primary schools, we are not able to support them in terms of what Honorable Tongi was talking about, the issue of providing bursaries to them or educational support. The only thing we can do, Honorable Speaker, is supporting them by providing educational infrastructure. But I think, Honorable Speaker, what I've realized for the time I've been a member of parliament for that area, it is very expensive to keep them in school, by the way, more expensive than the secondary schools, because they have special needs. And how I wish, Honorable Speaker, as a house, we would also make a provision so that as part of our bursaries, we can as well support these children who are enabled differently, be able to access their education. Honorable Speaker, the other area which I think is important is the area of health. I've also realized, Honorable Speaker, because they are enabled differently, they are also likely to face health issues or health challenges more than us who are living normal life. And on that case, Honorable Speaker, it would also be important to have some affirmative action when it comes to do with health bills, so that the country can go out there and make provision so that when some of them are sick, Honorable Speaker, they could be able to access health services in public institutions, either free or at a subsidized rate, Honorable Speaker. Because in that case, then we'll be supporting them. The other thing, Honorable Speaker, is since we are signatory to many of these international instruments, Honorable Speaker, I think the challenge we have as a country is enforcement, Honorable Speaker. Like now, we are all aware that we are saying most of the buildings in the city and in towns should be able to have a provision where the disabled can access those buildings without much struggle. But, Honorable Speaker, in time you go around this town, you realize that the people who are enabled differently are really struggling to access services, more so where those services are found either in floor 3, floor 4, going all the way to 20, Honorable Speaker. So you realize that if they have to get to a lift also, Honorable Speaker, it's a challenge. Very few structures are provision where the kind of lifts which are there can be accessible by our people who are enabled differently. The same with our abolition blocks, Honorable Speaker. You go to most buildings, you find abolition blocks, Honorable Speaker, have no provision for people who are enabled differently. To me, I think this law, Honorable Speaker, has come at the right time, so that as a house, although I don't know that we'll be able to see it through in terms of processing this bill, how I wish that we are able to process it through. But, Honorable Speaker, I want to say, even if we don't manage to process this law through, Honorable Speaker, I want to urge my colleague, Honorable Danita Ngati, who I'm very sure she's coming back to the 13th Parliament. That one I'm very sure. That when she comes back, Honorable Danita Ngati, this becomes your bill number 1. If we will not be here, some of us. But if I will also be here like you, I'll make sure that we champion this bill and we get it through this house. So that at the end of the day, Honorable Speaker, we have this bill becoming an act of Parliament. Because it is going to be very good for this country. And I'm sure our colleague also, Honorable Janet Senei, I saw she managed to pull through the nominations. That's another, almost like Angaradi. She has one leg already here. I'm praying for her that she also comes back to this house. And, Honorable Speaker, we need a critical mass of people who are enabled differently in this house, so that when these matters come up, we are able to push them through. We also want to take this opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to say probably to our colleague, Honorable Sankok, who we know what he's going through. My prayer is that he's able to pull through this and come back to this house, so that by the time we're going to get that reading, he is here to make his contribution, because he has championed the interest of people who are enabled differently in this house in an excellent manner, Honorable Speaker. And it would be good that he has this input in this bill. As I conclude, Honorable Speaker, I want to wish you honorable members well, those who are supporting this bill, and my appeal is we see whether we can fast track it so that this becomes an act of Parliament, so that we have the right legal framework in this country. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
Member Bosaku.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise on the onset to condole with the family of Honorable Sankok, who lost his son in a most tragic circumstance. We wish them Godspeed. In this bill, I believe he would have contributed to this debate and embellished it, because from where he sits, he has a better understanding of a lot of issues that people with disabilities go through day in, day out. Honorable Speaker, I want to pick up from where Danita Gatti stopped. In the last Parliament, we were in the same Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations as we began the first session. And I think when that tragic accident happened, Danita Gatti was wheelchair bound, and in one of our foreign visits, and she was a member of that delegation, I think we could feel the stress that she was going through and how much it was inconveniencing to have a member of a delegation who needed special assistance to reach places of visit and even to access some of the meeting areas. Honorable Speaker, our Constitution 2010 is among the most celebrated constitutions world over. It is considered to be progressive, particularly in the area of the Bill of Rights. In the Bill of Rights, I believe that one of the fundamental is right to life, and for that matter, quality life. The people with disabilities in our midst are people who lack voices. They lack access to opportunities, to employment, to business, and also even they lack access to even those of us in leadership because they are unable to reach us. Honorable Speaker, the AU Protocol on Persons with Disabilities and Older Persons that this House passed, I think 2 months ago, is also a landmark instrument that we as a nation, we must walk the talk. Honorable Speaker, persons living with disabilities are among those who are very poor in the society. I think if we are truthful to ourselves, when you walk around your constituency, many of them live in what you call undesirable dwellings because they can't afford decent housing. They don't have the resources to put themselves in where others will. But as Honorable Danita Gatti said, for you to understand the suffering and the disadvantages that people living with disabilities go through is just to experience when you are almost 100% well and when a tragic accident happens and you become a person living with disability. That comparing the two, you find that life has changed completely. And learning from somebody like her, this particular bill is a landmark bill as far as I'm concerned. Because in most of our societies, those persons living with disability, many of them are never brought to public limelight. The families will tend to hide them. the families will tend to protect them because they feel that they can easily be ridiculed. Some maybe mothers will protect them to the extent that they will keep them in the houses. For that matter, if this bill is passed, the government will have the authority to seek out, particularly for those young members, children and minors, so that they can be accessed and they can be provided with the necessary opportunity, whether it is health, whether it is education, and for them to secure a decent life. Honorable Speaker, the strength of Kenya as a nation will largely be reflected in the manner in which it will look after the disadvantaged members of the society. And in this particular case, the opportunity has arisen for fundamental rights and disadvantaged members to be considered as minorities in our midst who should be looked after. And the opportunity is now. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the Persons with Disabilities Bill, National Assembly Bill number 61 of 2021. Honorable Speaker, this bill is very timely. It's coming to answer the concerns that are enshrined in the Constitution under the Bill of Rights. And Honorable Speaker, no constituency, no village, no area doesn't have a person with a disability. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, when we look at the time frame since 2001 to date, we have not been able to correct this bill. And now the new constitution coming in 2010 has also did actually take over so much that was missing in the link between the 2001 Act and the current position, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when you look at Section 19.2 of this bill, which requires that the employer, it is actually emphasizing on the position of the employer to adjust or make adjustments during the recruitment processes, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is very evident that most employers would want to do away with persons with a disability right from the process of recruitment. They would want to use the recruitment procedures or requirements which eliminate the chances that any person with a disability can be employed. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, this bill shall be correcting those issues and making sure that, Honorable Speaker, any kind of employer who wants to employ does so based on the issue that at least 5% of the staff he's going to hold shall be persons with a disability. Honorable Speaker, being disabled does not mean you are enabled. Honorable Speaker, looking at the issues of persons with disability, it's not automatic that every part of the body shall be disabled. You find that, Honorable Speaker, one person might have maybe a deformation on the hand, a deformation on an eye, or a particular element, but that doesn't mean, Honorable Speaker, that person is not able to work. So when you segregate him because of his or her position in terms of physique, what it means, Honorable Speaker, is that you are making his family or the dependents on that person not to live the normal life as it's supposed to be, Honorable Speaker. When you look at most of the artisans, most of the craftspeople, Honorable Speaker, most of the good works, Honorable Speaker, is from the persons with disability. They tend to concentrate more even than the normal person, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, being disabled does not mean that that person is unable to deliver anything as far as human being is concerned. Honorable Speaker, we are all candidates of disability. At any one time, one person can become is normal, but it rises up tomorrow, Honorable Speaker, that that person is disabled. Looking at the scenario of what my sister and the Honorable Member has just said, it is evident that, Honorable Speaker, we are all candidates, and we were here together in the 11th Parliament, together with Honorable Danita, Honorable Speaker. She used to really have very good example and could really tell us life in the U.S., how she had been in the U.S., and she was very capable, Honorable Speaker, of eloquently telling us how life is. Unfortunately, the call of an accident made her to join the persons with disability. Honorable Speaker, it is evident that she is still able to deliver what she's supposed to do, Honorable Speaker. Looking at our colleague, I want also to walk the path of Honorable Makali Mulu, to also wish that Honorable Sankok takes it easy at this very hard moment following what happened to his family, Honorable Speaker. But Honorable Speaker, looking at what Honorable Sankok is able to debate in this House, he is able to sit, Honorable Speaker, long hours than most of my colleagues. He sits, Honorable Speaker, from morning. On a Wednesday, he is the first one to open the chamber in the morning, and he'll be the last one to leave the chamber. That doesn't mean he doesn't have what to do. He is able to do other things, but he is patient. He is capable of committing himself to work for the people that he represents, the 6.5 million people that he represents. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, being disabled does not mean you can be segregated on the basis of that. Therefore, if this law is well enforced, let us see various persons with disability getting assignments, getting jobs. And Honorable Speaker, another very perfect example of a person with disability is our PS, who is PS Josephat, Honorable Speaker. When she was given employment, she is the first PS who was disabled and can write very smart handwriting, Honorable Speaker, despite the fact that she has a disability of her nature. I want to salute her. She is very eloquent, she is very capable, and I want to thank the President for considering the PS Josfata for her appointment. Honorable Speaker, the other clause that is talking about in this bill is the issues. Honorable Speaker, this bill also emphasizes that the issue it also emphasizes, Honorable Speaker, that discrimination in terms of pay, in terms of promotion, in terms of training or access to opportunities, Honorable Speaker, should be curbed, Honorable Speaker, and should not be witnessed again from henceforth, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, that means, Honorable Speaker, we are protecting persons with a disability not only to get into employment, but also to be retained into employment by not just being given the lower cadres, but they should be allowed to grow through the ranks to highest levels in the office, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is therefore important to note that organizations should now be allowed, and even us as legislators, Honorable Speaker, we should create enabling infrastructures so that it is not just to let that person be employed because he's a person with a disability. He should be also a person who has gone to school. So it's our turn, Honorable Speaker, that we also create good infrastructures, good schools. We give good supportive gears like wheelchairs. Honorable Speaker, that this person is able, now that we are creating good roads like the expressway, to enable us drive very fast on those roads, how about persons with a disability? Their best way to give them, enable them to walk, is to give them infrastructure, the walking gears, even if it will mean wheelchairs, Honorable Speaker, improved ones, which can motorize and go a longer distance to enable them go to school and come back home. Therefore, as legislators, those who will be coming back into this House, and I hope and wish that my people of Navajo can give me another term, we should now be putting into force that this law, we give supportive laws to this law so that we give our people, persons with disability, enough infrastructure to enable them, to support them, and also give them their headways in terms of what they can achieve, not just because they are disabled, but we give them the enablance to make sure that they are well-schooled and well-enabled. Honorable Speaker, in terms of technical institutions, we should also give wider technical institutions. Right now, we are building, each constituency is putting up a technical college. How about persons with a disability? Are we considering those persons in terms of the technical skills that we are going to give to them? For now, we can use the few institutions that are around, but we need also to provide for funds and resources to enable these persons with a disability to also advance in their courses using very well equipped technical colleges and universities. With that information, with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Member for Buri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like to support this bill, which is aimed at total recognition of our people living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, this bill has come the right time because we people who have been adorned with all the parts of our body, it has been a warring thread because the people living with disability had no bill that supports their existence as Kenyan citizens. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that worries me quite a lot, Mr. Speaker, is that even from the onset, if you go to public institutions like the primary schools, you're not going to find many people, children, with disability in the learning institutions. We don't know where these children are because the parents don't want to expose them. Mr. Speaker, this bill is now going to bring in the total management of the children living with disability right from birth all the way to old age. Mr. Speaker, we are now in a new education curriculum, the CBC. But Mr. Speaker, you find that the curriculum does not put more emphasis on people living with disability as they are putting with the people living normal lives. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill because once the council is set, the board is set, they will make it mandatory that all the people living with disabilities are registered right from birth. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, this bill recognizes the need to identify these people and to have them medically examined so that they are certified as people living with disability. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is coming in at a time, and specifically when the new government is coming into place. It is our hope and belief that once the government of UDA takes office, our key responsibility is to bring up those people who are not being taken care of. And the people living with disability will be a priority to us. We want to uplift those people, both economically, socially, and politically. So, Mr. Speaker, I agree with other fellow members that this bill is very important, and I urge, once this bill is presented to the Senate, they will add more value, and urge the county government to put more resources and focus, because we are going to pass this bill, and because this is a devolved function also, just like everybody has said, we hope the county government will take this seriously and pass the bill. Mr. Speaker, we find there's a lot of discrimination, particularly even in the armed forces, the Kenya Defense Forces. Mr. Speaker, the last recruitment of KDF, they discriminated against women and the people living with disability. We want to urge the government to be in the forefront of ensuring there is equal opportunities for everybody, even in the Kenya Armed Forces. There is nothing that says that somebody living with disability cannot work with the armed forces. We have the most intelligent people in this country who are disabled, and their passion is also to work in KDF. So I urge the government to take that seriously and not discriminate against these people. But this bill coming good time, I hope and believe that its implementation will be fast-tracked. And I believe, because we are coming back to that in the Parliament, will ensure that this bill is implemented to the letter. So, Mr. Speaker, I support.
The Honorable Wanjira, member for Gilgil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You may confuse people by using that name. But I take this opportunity to thank you for that opportunity and thank the mover of this bill. And I'll start by quoting Mahatma Gandhi, that he said that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable. And I think I'm actually surprised that in this country, we actually don't have this law in place. We have spoken about it. We have tried to implement some of the things that we are talking about today. In the international fora, in the statutory instruments, we have been doing a lot of this. It's actually a surprise that we have not been able to put a framework to actually implement it. And Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues who have already spoken to say that it's quite an expansive bill. I have scanned through it, and I think the issues that I will touch on are like four. For one, it's quite unfortunate that we are talking of accessibility today. And because I sit with Honorable Tim Wanyonyi in a committee, it is not once we have cancelled a meeting in a hotel because that hotel is not friendly to people with disabilities. And you can imagine if an MP who can afford that kind of a hotel and this parliament don't get accessibility, then what are the normal mwananchi, what are our people out there doing? Mr. Speaker, if there is any one living example of how quickly one can become a person with a disability in this house is Honorable Denita Gatti. Because last parliament we were together, she started very well. She was actually walking on her feet, like has been said by most of our colleagues, and today she sits on a wheelchair. So, Mr. Speaker, all of us are potential persons living with disability. And Mr. Speaker, how we treat them is quite important and critical. Mr. Speaker, the issue of separation. Here I've seen that the bill has segregated it to women, has segregated to men, and finally to children. Because different categories of people living with disability have different challenges. The issue of women, Mr. Speaker, is very close to me, and I've seen that they have included the issue of sexual reproductive health. And this, Mr. Speaker, is already in the supreme law of the land in Article 10 and Article 27 of the Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, something that I've noted in this bill is very clear that every woman living with disability has the right to retain and control her fertility. Why do I say that, Mr. Speaker? Because some of the people will get family members who not only hide these persons with disability, they also take decisions, especially on reproduction and reproductive health, in their own hands without giving any right whatsoever to the person and to the women who maybe want to sire children and are actually taken through a process of contraception or a process of sterility that they are not consenting to. Mr. Speaker, this is very critical, that the issue of birth control, the women living with disability must also have a say and have a right to control their bodies. Mr. Speaker, the issue of recognition. This starts right from the birth certificate stage, starts from the ID, starts from the passport, and Mr. Speaker, this also controls the issue of human rights, controls the issue of civic and political rights. That is why in this bill, IEBC is actually mandated to ensure that even during voting, even like this year being an election year, Mr. Speaker, that the people with disability are given access to polling station, they are given access to a voter's card, they are given access to a passport if they wish, and they are given the right to vote, and they are also given the right to be assisted if they need be, to be assisted in a polling station. Mr. Speaker, the issue of recognition is critical because it is what gives you your identity, and it must be protected by all means. Mr. Speaker, there is an issue that has also caught my eye. The issue of encouraging employers to be able to employ qualified persons with disability. That is Article 21 of this bill. Mr. Speaker, there is a very interesting thing because it gives an incentive that if you're a firm or an organization and you actually employ a person with disability, you can be able to claim some percentage of your taxable income from government and you're given a relief.
That, Mr. Speaker, what it will do is that it will encourage more and more people to be able to take up persons with disability in their organizations and take up people who can do the work and who can qualify. And Mr. Speaker, it also protects these workers from unplanned and from firing and from dismissal that is random and that is because of their disability. Mr. Speaker, that will go a long way to ensure that we protect these persons with disability. On the issue of children, Mr. Speaker, and I know Honorable Makali Mulu has spoken about it, we try to even support them with bursaries and with CDF money to be able to get proper education. But there's a level of children that we don't pay bursaries or help, Mr. Speaker, and that is the age between from birth and the primary school, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I know we want to fast track this bill and avoid the counties, but I don't think it will be possible to entirely avoid the counties because the council has been mandated to actually liaise with the national government, and they are the people who are responsible for ECD, the early childhood development. How then do we rope in the county to be able to do their part? They are also the same people, county governments, that are also mandated to deal with polytechnics, to deal with the planning of towns, to deal with ensuring that drainage, the passages, walkways are done in the counties and in the cities and in the towns, Mr. Speaker. This can only be done when there is good cooperation between the county government and the national government. The issue of special schools, Mr. Speaker, even if we want to streamline and ensure that these kids are interacting with the able-bodied kids in the schools, Mr. Speaker, we will not run away from having special schools because caregivers are having a very hard time. I know, like in my constituency, because you'll get a child needs an all-round the whole day, someone who can take care of the children, take them to the toilet. It cannot be treated the same way as we treat the normal primary school. So that means, Mr. Speaker, even when we incubate them, like I will pick at a school in my constituency, like Township, we have the primary section and we also have the special section. What then it means, Mr. Speaker, is even as we allocate monies through the capitation, as we do with the Ministry of Education, there must be affirmative action to give enough money to the special schools to be able to take care of these children round the clock, Mr. Speaker, hire enough people who can be able to take care of the children who need bathing, who need changing, who need diapers, those that need mobility assistance, Mr. Speaker. This cannot be a cheap affair. The government must be deliberate about it and be able to allocate enough monies that will be able to run these schools. Mr. Speaker, I would want to end there, but I also want to join my colleagues to also wish Honorable Sankok, who also has been a champion of people with disabilities in this house, to wish him well with his family and to send my condolences on my own behalf and of those of my family and the people of Gilgil constituency, to be able to pray that God gives them peace this time when they have actually lost their son, Mr. Speaker. With those remarks, I support.
Honorable Tonui. Honorable Tonui, are you ceding your ground?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to comment on this bill. This bill is a very, very important bill because it's going to mainstream issues to do with people with disabilities. These are the groups which we need to take care of because this is a club where we can easily join at any given time. So we need to update it to be in line with the Constitution of 2010. And I think this is timely, and we need to support this bill. The rights of people with disabilities must be taken care of seriously, especially even the issues to do with access to buildings. We need to ensure that we legislate and ensure that they are able to access buildings without any hindrance. We need to ensure that even in terms of taxation, we take care of the interests of people with disabilities, because we know they require specialized equipment in order to operate. Such things like vehicles, as they import, we need to zero rate it. We need to ensure that taxation is removed from the vehicles meant for people with disabilities, because they will need to remodify them in order to be able to use it. So those are some of the issues which we need to ensure that we provide for the people with disabilities. I'm happy that the government has ensured that people with disabilities are able to access some stipend every month, especially those homes with people with disabilities. That one is a positive direction, and we need to support it. We need to provide more funds towards people with disabilities. What we also need to do is to mainstream in terms of employment, the people with disabilities. Ensure that that requirement of 5% in terms of employment is respected in the recruitment. That people with disabilities are provided with opportunities to get employment, especially in public offices. That one needs to be taken care of. Issues to do with procurement, we need to ensure that it is protected also in this bill, to ensure that they are able to be protected when they compete with others for tenders, that a certain proportion of government tenders are given to these people so that they can improve their well-being. These are the people at the lowest level of the pyramid. These are the people whom we are saying they are at the bottom, and those are the people whom we require to pull out of that bottom. These are real hustlers which we need to address. And therefore, this bill is timely. I support. I am in the Labour Committee where we are dealing with this bill. I know we are still processing it because it's a very, very long bill. And we were not yet through, and I'm very sure the chairman will be able to bring many amendments on this bill, which we will support to ensure that we take care of the interests. Where there is conflict with public finance management bill, those issues should be polished up and straightened so that the people living with disabilities can be assisted to benefit more through this bill. With those few remarks, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Honorable Kiari, why do you look unsettled? And it is your turn.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just keen to contribute to this bill because I do believe that this is an important bill. And Mr. Speaker, the reason why I stand to support this bill is because it's a bill that tries to bring more equity. And I'm using the word equity because I'm choosing to use it over equality, because when it comes to human ability, I do want to associate myself with a quote by Albert Einstein, who once told us that if we were ever to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then the fish would always grow up to imagine that it is stupid. This is to mean that, as it is, we are expecting people living with disability to compete in the same world, in the same job market, with people who are able-bodied. But the moment we start legislating towards equity of all people, and including the people with disability, then we start walking right towards the path of equity. But Mr. Speaker, before I get into my builds to this bill, I'd like to take this opportunity, this very early opportunity, to condole with the family of a very good friend of mine in the name of nominee 001, the Honorable Sankok, for the loss in their family. And on behalf of myself, on behalf of my family, and on behalf of the people of Dagoretti South, I'd like to send a message of condolence to the Honorable Sankok and his family. Mr. Speaker, I might want to add just one word, that to the Honorable David Sankok, as dark as this moment may look, the good book reminds us that morning may endure through the night, but light will come and joy will come in the morning. So Honorable Sankok, I'd like to just refer you to a great man in the Bible who shares a name with you, the man by the name David, who in a moment like this, after losing a son, grieved and mourned, and when he was done with the grieving and mourning, he woke up and decided to put on his best clothes, have a good meal, and he said that wherever the son has gone, the son will never come back, but it is us who will go where that young man has gone. Mr. Speaker, the discussion around disability has hitherto been very scattered, and focusing the issues of disability to be domiciled in one piece of legislation is a huge step forward, Mr. Speaker. And just for that one reason, I do support this bill, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that we will get an opportunity when we come to the third reading so that we are able to expand this bill. And my focus, Mr. Speaker, is specifically on clause number 35, which is on the functions of the council, Mr. Speaker. The functions of the council have been enumerated, and they are quite a number, Mr. Speaker. But I do still feel that there is space for expansion of this section 35 so that it can be brought to the world that we are living in, Mr. Speaker. We are living in the technological, digital world, Mr. Speaker. A place where data and research is currency, Mr. Speaker. So I do believe, even in this space of the discussion around disability, we can have a space for technology, for research, and for production, Mr. Speaker. Technology, in the sense that as the world advances, the able-bodied are really thinking on how they can utilize the available technology. We need to bring the people with disability up to speed with the technology of the day. Research, Mr. Speaker. I do believe that there are issues of disability that are very geo-specific, that there are issues of disability that are unique to Africa, others are unique to Kenya, others are unique to regions within our country, Mr. Speaker. So I do believe that this country needs to invest in good research so that we are able to map out the disability situation in our country, because research will inform what kind of investment we will make for taking this disability discussion forward. Mr. Speaker, on production, I hear time and again talking about zero rating equipment that is used, equipment and devices that is used by people living with disability. Mr. Speaker, the tragedy is that almost 90-something% of the devices that are used by people with disability are imported, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it the high time that we decided as a country that we can produce some of these devices within our borders, Mr. Speaker? This would go a long way in cutting the costs of devices that are used by people living with disability. If we could set up production plants, factories that would manufacture some of these devices, and some of them could be as basic as a walking cane. They could be spectacles, they could be hearing aids, they could be wheelchairs. Mr. Speaker, if we were able to go in that direction, then we will be not talking about only zero rating devices that are coming from abroad, but we could also have a good cachet of devices that would be, we would be producing locally. Mr. Speaker, the bill is very elaborate on the rights of people living with disability, and especially in employment. But Mr. Speaker, I hail from the county of Nairobi, and I can say that government has employed all the people they are able to employ. Corporate Kenya has employed all the people that they can employ. That most of our people who are in meaningful engagement are currently in what we call hustles. These are people who are in the Juakali sector. So, Mr. Speaker, as we are talking about people with disability in employment, we will have to start considering how we decriminalize hustle in this country. How do we decriminalize the work that is taken up by hustlers, some of who are living with disability? Mr. Speaker, in this city today, one of the biggest crimes you can ever do is to try and conduct honest business as a hustler. Mr. Speaker, you will be chased down streets, you will be bungled up, you will be put into city council vehicles, and you can imagine this in itself is bad enough for an able-bodied person. But when it comes to a person with disability, it even becomes more sacrilegious, Mr. Speaker. So even as we're talking about persons with disability who are in employment, we will have to consider the fact that most of the people living with disability end up doing hustles like hawking, Mr. Speaker. They're the people selling sweets in the streets, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones who are hawking clothes in the streets, Mr. Speaker. So we'll have to secure business spaces for the people living with disability. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with the Honorable Wangari that there is a big county function when it comes to taking care of the people living with disabilities, Mr. Speaker. So even as we are seeing this as a bill emanating from the National Assembly, we will also have to think at the back of our mind that there are quite a number of functions, and specifically pointing at education, Mr. Speaker, where the national government takes responsibility for primary and secondary schools. However, the early childhood education is domiciled within counties. The tertiary institutions, like polytechnics, are also domiciled under county functions, Mr. Speaker. So even as we are taking care of these young angels who are living with disabilities in their primary and secondary schools, we've got to remember that early childhood education is critical, especially for people living with disability. It is at this point that they are given their skills for life. Skills might be as basic as potty training, Mr. Speaker, which might come naturally for an able-bodied person. But for a child born with disability, it might take them a long time to be able to learn some of these basic life skills, like potty training, Mr. Speaker. So even as we are thinking about what the national government will do, we'll also need to consider very seriously what the county functions are and how they interact with this bill. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to end it there and say that this is a bill that I would support any day, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that I will get the opportunity to make the relevant amendments when we get to the third reading. I do appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to contribute to this very important bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Nyenze, Edith.
Thank you, Speaker, sir, for this opportunity to contribute to this bill. Actually, I note that disability is the umbrella term for any or all of the impairment of the body, structure, or function, a limitation in activities, the task that a person does, or a restriction in participation that actually defines what disability is. And let me say that this is a very good bill because it will enable the people with disability to be recognized and registered. And this bill will also try to bring together all the segmented parts of the bills of disability into one umbrella. And this will enable different types of disabilities to be identified because there are various types of disabilities, some of which have not been recognized. Like I remember a few days ago, last month, I met as Tamara. And this Tamara and difficulties, and you know that most of them have difficulties in expressing themselves or talking. And these ones have not been recognized, this has not been recognized as a disability. And there are so many other disabilities which have not been recognized as such. And therefore, this is a very good bill which will enable such disabilities which have not been recognized to be recognized and be registered, and in doing so also be assisted in their various disabilities. The other time I talked about disability, especially of children who have spear disabilities, and I brought it up in the Children's Act. We have some children who have spear disability, and these ones are still put in the brackets of
of disability, but some of them are so severe such that they don't even go to school, such that they can't talk, they can't even move, and such disabilities have not been actually identified fully and assisted fully, because according to me, such disabilities would require a center where these children can be assisted medically, and this would also free their parents, especially their mothers, and some of them their grandmothers. They would actually give them time to also attend to other businesses, because with such children, they grow to be big people who cannot even move, who cannot assist themselves. And such mothers are always around their children, and therefore they do not do any meaningful activities or businesses to help even the other children. Such mothers are even discriminated against by their friends, because they feel that they will not be able to be as active as them. So such special and disabilities, this bill should be able to recognize it and also come up with ways of assisting such people with such disabilities. Also, our education system should also be able to incorporate some of these in their curriculum. They've done it, but for some, they've not. Because the other time I took a child who was on disability to a college. They are deaf and dumb, and they are supposed to go through the same national examination process. The examination is the same as a person who is able. So the education system should also recognize that, and maybe even give them more time to study, or set different exams for such people with challenges, so that they are given enough time to actually concentrate on their studies and do the exams. If it's others are doing in 1 hour, they can be given like 2 hours to complete their exams, because they have some difficulties. So this bill is actually coming at the right time, because persons with disability are entitled to a barrier-free and disability-friendly environment to enable them to access buildings, roads, and other social amenities, to enable them to access education, to enable them access employment, and such a bill would actually put such structures and policy in place so that we do not leave behind some of our people. So as role models, because we are leaders, we should also set a good example to the other employers by employing some of these people with disability in our constituency offices, in our CDF offices, because by doing so, we will actually be acting in good faith and will be a good example even to the other employers. And let me also say sorry to our colleague, Honorable Sankok. If he was here, he would have really contributed so much to this bill. But I say, Paul, we are with him, we are praying for him. So with that, Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
Honorable Joyce Kamene.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to express my views about the people living with disability. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by first acknowledging the people living with disability and say that it is us as leaders who ought to have a lot of compassion for the people living with disability. And there are very many areas that we have failed. starting because I want to speak first personally about my experience with the people living with disability. In Machakos County, for instance, majority of them have not gotten access to the assessment to doctors so that they can verify their disability. And you will find that doctors are mainly centered at the hospitals that are near towns, and it is so hard for them to travel. The income they get, and especially their parents, to take these children for assessment is normally next to impossible. And that is one area that, as we prepare, as this bill is being prepared, that we should ensure that every person living with disability gets an assessment in a more simple and an accessible way. The other thing I've observed is the issue of doctors, physiotherapists. Devolution is here, but you will find that the hospitals back in Mashinani do not have doctors or physiotherapists who ought to be assisting the children living with disability because they need exercises to be performed. Therefore, you will find that these children continue getting worse instead of being handled in a right way. The other issue with the people living with disability is the issue of drugs. There are some of them who will need drugs every day. They are on drugs. And when you get to the situation in the family, they cannot even afford putting food on the table. So these children become an endangered species. How I wish that this bill would sit down even on the third reading to ensure that anything that is amiss is added so that the people living with disability may benefit out of this bill. I beg to support and say thank you for the opportunity.
Let's now have the mover reply. Majority Leader.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to thank the various members who, on this first day of coming out of recess, it's usually very unusual to find members contributing to a bill so eloquently and in such large numbers. And I deliberately said today we will not even ask for an interruption through Standing Order number 95 to allow as many people as possible to express their issues on this matter, on the Persons with Disabilities Bill, because specifically it's a significant portion of our society that often feels that they have been marginalized by the rest of society, and when we have an opportunity to discuss their matters, it's important that we give a total concentration. So I want to thank the members who have taken time to debate on this matter over the last 2 hours or so, and to assure the members that we would probably wish to, we don't have a lot of time. It will be my desire that we get any amendments within the next 1 or so weeks, so that any time from next week, pending, depending on how we also process on other pending matters in the House, we could have a committee of the whole House to finalize on this bill and have it then going through the other processes of assent. And I do know that the member for Gilgil specifically did raise the issue that there's a possibility of this bill affecting counties. And that relationship has been very well captured within Clause 58, which is basically Part 5, the relationship between the national government and county governments on matters to do with disability. And none of those matters relate to the functions of the of the county government or the governance of the county government, and hence, even at the point of the concurrence between the two speakers, it had been agreed that yes, the bill does not concern county governments in terms of Article 110 of the Constitution, because it doesn't affect the functions and the powers of the county government, but it, of course, like any other bill, people live in counties, and everyone could argue that anything that affects a person in a county affects the county government, but there's a very clear distinction between affecting people in a county and affecting the functions of in accordance with Article 110. So, because of that, I would like to see this moving forward, and I would like to encourage any member who has an amendment to bring, so that we could start processing all those amendments, and in the next 2 weeks or so, we could well give, the 12th Parliament will give life to the Persons with Disability Bill of 2021 to update the last bill of 2003, which is 18 years old. Honorable Speaker, I think I would want to wait for all those issues. I know members raised a number of issues, and we can process them within the framework of the winnowing of all those amendments and their suggestions to make this bill better. But by and large, I do believe that, and I'm very encouraged with the concurrence that members have had in terms of the contents of the bill and why it became necessary. And I didn't hear any dissenting views in terms of this matter should be removed. It was, we can make it better, and I look forward to those amendments to seeking to make this bill better. With those remarks, I beg to reply.
Thank you, Majority. We shall pay putting the question on that particular item. Next order.
Order number 12, the Military Veterans Bill, National Assembly Bill number 4 of 2022, second reading.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Military Veterans Bill, being National Assembly Bill number 4 of 2022, be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, this bill, and I'm happy that we only published this bill on 1st of February, and now we are in May, and we're debating it, which shows a bit of urgency in terms of why this bill, much as it has taken a long time to come, but it's so urgent and so important that we thought we need to clear it before the 12th Parliament goes on the recess. This bill basically seeks to establish a regulatory and institutional framework for the management of military veterans and the affairs of their dependents. And additionally, it also seeks to establish a Dependents Education Fund and the Defense Forces Retirement Home. Honorable Speaker, when we're talking of who is a military veteran, the bill in part 2, basically at clause 6, is very specific in terms of who we're defining as a military veteran. And for avoidance of doubt, these are anyone who has served in the Kenya Defense Forces, anyone who became a member of the Kenya Armed Forces after 1963, that is before, between 1963 and 2010, when Kenya Armed Forces was changed to Kenya Defense Forces. Then, of course, there are those who served in the King's African Rifles, as it was named then before 1963. We're also talking of, in addition to having served, they have completed the service in the armed forces of the Kenya Defense Forces, and they currently receive a pension from either the armed forces or Kenya Defense Forces. And most importantly, we're talking of people who have not been dishonorably discharged from military service, because those are in a different category. But those who have been discharged on medical grounds, however, not in the same category, whether or not they receive a pension will be regarded for purposes of this bill as military veterans. So again, the bill is quite a bit specific in terms of knowing who we're dealing with, because if you don't figure out the person, then we could end up with all manner of people also coming up and saying they're also veterans. Now, Honorable Speaker, as we all know, military veterans have served our country for a long time in a number of ways, and often putting their lives on the line for a great country, because we're talking about people who go out there, and those who have been in the service, and I know we have quite a number in this house, we'll confine to their members that we are not just going there to spar with people on, it's live bullets at play that could basically extinguish your life within seconds. We also know the threats that confront us as a nation, both external, and we've seen those things when we've been attacked by terrorists and people who don't like peace and order, as well as internal terror threats that have been coming on board and attacks. And the people we depend on, not just for our safety, but to dispel and to give that assurance that we are well protected, so that even those guys who would want to attack us feel that they can't do it in the presence of our forces, is these people who served within our forces, and eventually when they retire, they become the veterans. But unfortunately, by the time they leave their service, they are left struggling, and even when they start their businesses, because of the way they operate within the military, it becomes very difficult even to operate within the civilian societies, because you're talking of two different sets of people. One is so methodical, and we saw that during the funeral of the late president, when we were told, even from this house, that, you know, you have to finish business by a certain minute. And, you know, there's nothing like, can we be given an extra 5? You know, it's a minute is a minute, military precision. Now, when you're used to that kind of precision, and then all of a sudden you have to go starting negotiating people to give you tenders, and they're telling you come next week and all that, it becomes a totally different ballgame. So we know they can't fit in that, and we need to get some better mechanisms of fitting them. I also know there are quite a number of challenges that come into that, and those who have been in the service may well be able to articulate this better. But there are cases that have been reported of family breakdowns and impoverishment. The disorders such as the post-traumatic stress disorders, which unfortunately have led to people committing suicide. They suffer from stifled access to medical and healthcare benefits, among other things. And this does not go down well, especially when you look at the other practices across the world, where people are treated much better because they put their lives on the line for the safety of their countries, both actively and also to deter those threats. And when we now look at what's happening on a global basis, it's in the, we know that others are really putting, are doing things to give some dignity and decorum to these people. And it's in the light of this sense that this bill seeks to anchor, through law, some institutions and resources that will be allocated for their overall benefit. So this bill proposes to accord the following benefits to a military veteran. And part of that is the counseling and treatment for the PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorders or related conditions, which have now been documented and become a main thing. And the other one is the physical rehabilitation of any condition arising out of military service. Then we have the honor and memorization of the fallen military veterans, education, training, and skill development, facilitation or advice on employment placement, and facilitation or advice on business opportunities. Like I did mention, you're telling somebody, you know, the typical thing that everyone Kenyan thinks of is like, I've left the military, it was a security operation, I should start a security company. And by the time they actually go to try to even market that company, you realize it's not, you know, as easy as that. So this advice on business opportunities and what to do is some of the things that need to be done. And I'm glad, Honorable Speaker, when you look at President Uhuru Kenyatta has, for some reason, you'd imagine he went to a military academy because within his tenure, he's had a lot of attachment to the military, from getting them to do public civil works, from getting them to take over Kenya Meat Commission and rejig it and make it profitable, from, you know, General Badi and the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, and so many other things, that the construction of all these hospitals, and even within the military barracks. If you look at the works that have been going on, the hospitals, the rehabilitation, the training things, it's quite a lot that's being done for those in service, and I'm sure most of this will also be used for those veterans as they're able to receive some of these services within those establishments. Honorable Speaker, this bill also recognizes that the military officers have dependents, the veterans have dependents, and those dependents will need some form of assistance of one form or the other. Again, due to the unique nature of their lives, because of the exposure to these people, they've been moving around. I know of some friends of mine who kept on shuffling, and their kids had to be moved. They're serving in Eldoret Barracks. The children are attending school there. All of a sudden, after I don't know how many years, Dr. Eseli might help us, you know, that cycle. You find the person has now been transferred to another place, and the children have to move. And then before long, there is something else. And so people are disrupted in terms of their lives. They can't even form, you know, permanent friends and all that. And when this third person, after going through all that, when they retire, the family gets as affected as the person retiring. And hence, so it's important that as we are looking at the veterans, we also look at the families. And what do we do in terms of the education placement for those children who find that they've been moving around, and all of a sudden, the person they depend on cannot rise in ranks beyond a certain point and has had to retire, and they're still in school. So these are some of the challenges we need to look at, and this bill is partly addressing some of those. The bill also seeks to establish a defense council, which again will have the administrative powers, including the development of a policy on military veterans. So consider the proposals by the CS, our Cabinet Secretary for Defense, also from the Chief of Defense Forces regarding policies on veterans, funding and budgeting in respect of veterans, so that their matters are not just left to some administrative unit within DOD, but now there is a formal structure that will be addressing some of these issues, including matters to do policy, not just the administration. And the bill proposes, Mr. Speaker, that this council shall be spearheaded by the sub-veterans who shall oversee all the administrative functions. The other highlights of this bill that I wish to speak and members of the Kenya Defense Forces and military veterans, as well as family members of deceased members of the Kenya Defense Forces or deceased veterans. Again, for those reasons that I said, that you don't end up terminating the education of a dependent just because the person has lost their life in war or has retired earlier because of the structure, the way it's structured. It's also, this bill is also proposing a very important component, which is the creation of a Defense Forces retirement home, which shall provide residential related services to military veterans when they reach a point where they need to spend their remaining days. You know, when we're talking of when those 1 foot in the grave days, and they can do that within the camaraderie and in the company of friends, and say we serve together in ABCD, and as they spend their remaining lives. Like I said, the lives of these members are characterized with some uncertainties. You know, first of all, there is a duty call, the restrictions in respect to certain rights, and their freedoms being limited. They cannot just move wherever they want. They cannot get into collective bargaining, much as the Constitution allows people to form trade unions. These people are excluded from that kind of thing. So they can only come to us as a house to help them with negotiating on their behalf and passing this kind of legislation so that they be accorded the necessary social protection and when they're in service and when they are out of service. And it's in that regard that I wish to call upon the members to support this bill and to look at it from that progressive perspective that, yes, we've done very well with the new constitution. We've taken into account of people's rights, but then we've also restricted some, and unless we then do within this house to afford those who can't speak for themselves, those who cannot get in trade unions to demand these things, that we take this opportunity to support our men and women in uniform when they remove those uniforms and become veterans, and recognizing that they have, in the time they have been in service, been an integral part of ensuring our security and giving that environment so we can all do what we do best. With those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I wish to beg to move and to ask the Chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, Honorable Tongi, to second.
Honorable Tongi. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to second this progressive bill. But having listened to the majority leader, sometimes you have a feeling that there's nothing useful to add because he's one gifted person. He has quite explained what the bills stand for and what we hope to achieve by the way of this bill. Honorable Speaker, nevertheless, I rise to support the second reading of the Military Veteran Bill, National Assembly Bill number 4 of 2022. Honorable Speaker, mine I want to sum it up in a form of a poet by Joan Fuchs, pens a memorable poem titled The Best on Earth. A Veteran Day is a tribute, she writes, and I quote, "If someone has done military service, they earn the title veteran, and more, they earn our deep respect and admiration. That they are special, no one can ignore. They sacrificed the comfort for the comfort we are enjoying today. The list is long of all the things they gave. Our veterans are extraordinary people. They are loyal, dedicated, and true and brave people. When terror and invasion were real threats, they moved towards the parade. They showed us they could handle any storm when all of us were running away from it. They showed us they could handle any challenge when most of us were having a second thought. We owe our freedom and our very lives to the veterans who put their lives on the line for the sake of our people and for the sake of the country. To our veterans who served in the uniform, they have done us proud. Our veterans should be celebrities, and indeed they are celebrities, Honorable Speaker. If you take an example of what is happening in Ukraine, for example, when everybody else is seeking refuge in another country, the soldiers in uniform are going towards where the bullets are coming from. That cannot be a normal person, Honorable Speaker. Those are indeed celebrities. They are exceptional. No other group can compare with them, Honorable Speaker. They sacrifice their family comfort. They sacrifice their own blood for the sake of us and me to have at this peaceful atmosphere in Parliament to discuss issues Kenya and make the laws for the good of the country. We are grateful for the many things they have done. They are always in our hearts, and they will always be in our prayers, Honorable Speaker. We owe our veterans support and friendship. Let no one ever question what they are worth, because they are worthless. Their price cannot be measured. Their value, their contribution cannot be quantified. These men and women served us and our country, our veterans, the very best on earth. Honorable Speaker, when you listen to that kind of a poem from one of the celebrated poet, Joan Fuchs, you get to appreciate that veterans are not just normal people. Being an officer, being a soldier is not a normal, ordinary job, Honorable Speaker. It's a job that you really have to think twice before you take it up. And I like the way Honorable Majority Leader has put it. These are the people who work and do things in an extraordinary way. And I'm grateful to our President, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, for the recognition, the opportunity he has given them to demonstrate what they're capable of doing. Before the President started giving them assignment, all of us never got to quite appreciate their capacity. Now we see what they're able to do. Look at the Kenya Meat Commission, which has been a roast-making company for the year, forever. Today, Kenya Meat Commission, they're able to pay the suppliers within a week, and you are given a guarantee, and it happens. The precision with which the army people operate is amazing. Look at Nairobi County. How I wish we'd duplicate this in every other county, where the real change that you can feel has gone on, has happened in our lives, before our eyes, Honorable Speaker. That you're able to walk in pavements, which we all thought it would only happen in America or elsewhere. But we are seeing it happening here in Kenya. And it's happening under the leadership, under the management of one of the generals. These are the kind of people, Honorable Chairman, Honorable Speaker, that we are celebrating today. And these are the kind of people that when they have done the service, when they are finally going home, we should be able to have a system through which we are going to remember them and recognize them, the Honorable Speaker. And I'm sure all of us have had a chance of traveling outside Kenya. When you go to other developed countries, Honorable Speaker, you go to America, on the 11th, they have a day they celebrate the veterans, which is they celebrate the veterans because they know without them, America probably would not be what it is today. That every November of 11th, they have to recognize and suspend everything else. It's a national holiday to appreciate and celebrate the veterans, the soldiers, the guys in uniform who have served and protected and made their country great. Honorable Speaker, if you go to UK, these are some of but there are a few examples. They have a day they're also celebrating for 2 minutes. The entire country comes to a standstill just for a moment of silence to appreciate what the veterans have been able to achieve for the good of the country. Sometimes we don't appreciate what they have done because we have not experienced, by God's grace, the war the way other countries have. Until then, sometimes we take them for granted, Honorable Speaker. But we have had people who have gone through war. Some of our soldiers have gone to Somalia, and they have come back to Kenya, maimed, disabled. They have go back to their families. They cannot be able to provide for their families like they were providing before. These people need to be given a special treatment, need to be given an opportunity to serve in different ways, Honorable Speaker. At least they need to be recognized. What the Americans have done and what the other developed economies have done, and we need to benchmark with them, Honorable Speaker, is that they have given the low-hanging fruits. Like when you're going to the parking, when you're going to the airport, you are given priority. When you are getting to the plane, veterans are given priority. This does not cost us anything, Honorable Speaker, other than to give them a chance and say, the veterans, if you are here on the queue, come and be served first. They appreciate that. It's a simple gesture, but it goes a long way to appreciate what they have been able to do for the country. Last week, I had one of my friends, one of my cousins, who is a veteran in the U.S., Honorable Speaker. When we went to the airport, he didn't pay for the parking fee when everybody else was paying. And those are simple things which really people appreciate. his mortgage. He doesn't pay the run rates. Those are some of the things we are saying. If we can get a way of getting to empower our veterans and give them an opportunity to enjoy those facilities, Honorable Speaker, I'm sure we'll be able to inspire our good sons and daughters to join the army so that they can serve the country. Because in the past, the army was a reserve for people, so to speak, who had not gone to school as we thought, in the way we understood it. But now that I have had an opportunity of serving in this committee for 5 years now, I know that the sharpest mind you can ever have in the army, actually. Some of them I picked at a very young age, taken through numerous courses, hands-on. They have skills which can transform this country. But what happens when they go home? This is one of the systems, in my opinion, which is so perfect, so efficient, that we need to encourage them and give them hope that even after they exit, we still be able to appreciate them as a country, we'll be able to appreciate their contribution to our people, and of course to recognize that without them, we'll not even be sitting here in the way that we are sitting here today, because if you go to Ukraine, for example, there's nothing like parliament. There's no sessions in parliament, because the armies, everybody else has taken refugee, and the armies are going to the war front. They're going to the front line and to protect their country. Those are the kind of people, Honorable Speaker, that we are speaking about today. That's the kind of appeal that we are developing, so that we address and appreciate our people, our soldiers in uniform. That when they have done their bit, when they go home, we'll remember and appreciate them and say thank you to them, because of them, Kenya is what it is today. Because I know my colleagues have seen some of the veterans here in Parliament who want to say something about this bill. Honorable Speaker, from where we are sitting as a committee, we believe it's a progressive bill, and we truly want to get it concluded in this level of Parliament, so that the next generation, the next Parliament which will come, will say there are people who sat down and they thought through this process and appreciated our unsung heroes who have given a lot of their life, put their life on the line for the sake of this country called Kenya. With that, Honorable Speaker, I support.
You second?
Yes, with that, I second. And I can see my vice chairman is here, really very anxious to speak. He's a son of a former general.
Well,
and my generals are there.
Tongi, the discretion to give you a vice chair is exclusively mine. But that is noted. Honorable members, I propose a question that the Military Veterans Bill, National Assembly Bill number 4 of 2020 be now read a second time. Let's get Honorable Lasso Ali for obvious reasons.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and thank you, you are kind. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this bill. I consider it to be a watermark bill. For somebody who comes from that background of the military. I joined the military when I was 19, and I left the military when I was 50-something to become a politician. I actually changed my military fatigues for a civilian suit, but in my bones and blood, I still believe I am a military person for the kindness of serving my country with patriotism and honor. This bill coming at the tail end of the life of the 12th Parliament is a watermark bill. I say watermark because there have been previous attempts to bring this bill, but I think there has been push and pull. I want to thank the leader of the majority, the government side, and also the current Chief of Defense Forces, General Kibochi, who has vigorously believed that something must be done in the life of the second government of Uhuru Kenyatta, and also in his lifetime as a general who will be leaving defense I believe, in a few years down the line. Honorable Speaker, I just want to share a story about the Second World War. In 1942, in South Pacific, an American warship was sunk by a Japanese fleet. In this warship, there were 5 brothers who chose to fight together. And historically, this changed a lot of things in the way the Americans managed their war machine. Because it was uncalled for 5 brothers to fight on a single ship. They were later known as the Sullivan brothers. They were celebrated. The general who was in charge of the Navy was writing letters of condolence. And then he wrote the first letter, he signed, the second, then the third, the fourth. Then when he was given the 5th letter, he said, "Oh my God, this is so big a thing that I cannot sign this as a general. It can only be signed by the commander-in-chief." In this particular incident, the letter was signed by the then president of US, Franklin Roosevelt, because the occasion was big, that one family can be told about the death of all 5 of their sons. But the family was asked what they felt about this thing. Then the mother said, "If I was given the opportunity, they will do it again. It made men of them. My boys did not die in vain." When people join the military, I think it is not more of a job, it is a calling. Although it provides opportunity to many, but there isn't much to gain through resources, because most of the time they will spend in the field, they will training, they will spend in the battlefield, and they will spend a few months in the barracks. The contact with even their families and the civilian population is quite limited. That is why, for an army man, whether it's Navy or Air Force, the chances of them embellishing themselves in life, of building big capacities in industries, in housing, they don't get many opportunities, because it is called in defense of the motherland. And that is why, when we think about what happens to a soldier who comes out of Somalia, having spent there 6 months or 1 year, they are likely to even have lost their family. Maybe somebody just got married and they are moved off to that fighting operational area. Then the wife has separated with the individual. They start it all over again. So as the leader of majority has rightly said, they may not have the opportunity to have a life that you would call comfort, which we in the civilian part of life tend to enjoy, that in the evening we'll go to our families, on the weekend we'll go out with our families. When you have time, maybe we go to tend to our properties or farms. They do not enjoy that. What this bill will eventually tend to do is to allow the military to manage the military soldier and their families until they have a separation with that institution. There are many who get injured in war or during the course of their training. But this is a good lesson to the other one who is in the front line. Because if this other one will not be looked after, the other one will not have the guts or the energy to fight with valor, to try and move into that fire to help his comrade. Because he knows, in the end, I will just be like the other person. So there are a few things that I would appreciate and talk about in this bill. The Military Veterans Management Board or Council. That allows that institution to be managed within the body of the military, where on the top policy side, we have the Defense Council. So that even in terms of seeking resources, it will be sought as part of the military resource package. The second thing is about the issue of education, housing, and health. Many of those who retire from the military will tend to have very meager savings because of the earnings. So the major problem in our country today is about health. So if there's a health package that is controlled by the military, then we believe even those who are injured, those who are wheelchair bound, they are likely to have a relatively decent life towards the end. In terms of housing or accommodation, those could be few, but if you help the few, then you have helped the many. There are others who will say, oh, what about the police? What about the APs and all that? I think that is a thought for another day. But as far as the military is concerned, it is a special institution that we need to treat their case on a merited basis in what this institution has done for this country for our lifetime. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Simiu Eseri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also contribute to this very important bill. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we take good care of our military personnel, not just while they're in service, but when they're out of service, because they need a peace of mind to be able to perform the duty of ensuring the security of the nation, securing our borders, and ensuring our sovereignty. They need a real peace of mind. It's difficult when that peace of mind is absent, because when you go to war and you come back, perhaps you are injured, you can't go on with your work, you are retired on medical grounds and things like that, and you are left there and you perhaps cannot take care of your responsibilities as a parent. So this bill actually is long overdue, and we should all support it, because this way we ensure that we have taken care of all the military veterans who have served this country with dedication. And I think, Mr. Speaker, you realized recently when the military took over the burial of the retired President, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, you saw the precision with which they did it, and every Kenyan was impressed. What they don't know is that a lot of work goes into that. When you see a parade moving in unison, it's not something that just happens at a drop of a coin. They actually work at it. And that's the same way they work when they're out there defending our borders, and when they're out there on peacekeeping missions in various parts of this world. So this bill is actually long overdue, in the sense that when I went through the bill, I was actually impressed that it's not just talking about taking care of the physical needs of the veteran, but also their psychological needs. Because, Mr. Speaker, when soldiers are exposed to a combat zone, they do get certain psychological stresses which need to be handled. And I'm glad that this bill actually addresses that issue, such that these veterans will also have access to good psychological care so that they can be rehabilitated to be able to mainstream them back into the society. And also the fact that the families will be taken care of, their medicals, their education, and things like those. So, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, I fully support this bill, and perhaps this should be the beginning so that in future we can beef it up and ensure that we actually give them more benefits than what the bill has actually foreseen. But we'll need to beef it up eventually to put in more benefits for the veterans. Because, Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that in this country, actually, when you look at the survival of these uniformed services people, apart from the military, even the police service, once they leave the service, actually you find that many of them end up leading a miserable life. And out there, when I meet some of the ex-soldiers in the villages who have retired and so on, they're actually very good people and they can be of very good service to the community. But then sometimes they lack the basics of being mainstreamed back into society. And this bill actually takes care of that. So, Mr. Speaker, I fully support and pray that the House passes it as fast as possible so that it's not overtaken by the short period that we have left. So at least this House will have delivered something good for the military by the time we end this last sitting of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Kerry, don't be nomadic.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very swift also. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to be contributing to this very important bill. And allow me to start by commending the Leader of Majority, Mr. Speaker, for being able to bring this and present it before the end of the life of the 12th Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And as Dr. Eseli has said, I do pray that we shall be able to pass this before the end of this 12th Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I also want to single out the Chief of Staff of the Kenya Defense Forces, General Kivoshi, for what work has gone to build this bill to the level that it has gotten and to present it to this House. And I do pray that it shall be a fitting honor for General Kivoshi to have this as another feather in his cap in his very illustrious career in the military. Mr. Speaker, whenever the picture of our military is painted, a very rosy picture is presented. Mr. Speaker, we are presented with a picture of a military that has been able to secure our borders, a military that has been able to maintain law and order in volatile zones in this continent and even beyond, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are also told about the role that this military has played in securing the sovereignty of our country, Mr. Speaker. However, behind this very rosy picture, Mr. Speaker, is a story of a big trail of bodies, and I want to use that figuratively, of men who have served very committedly in this military, who end up suffering when they go beyond, when they're out of service, Mr. Speaker. So in that very sense, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that this country is in order to bequeath a bill that checks into the welfare of these military officers when they're in service and beyond. Mr. Speaker, we know the contribution of the military, even beyond affairs of war and peacekeeping, Mr. Speaker. I will take an example of the issue, the discipline that you, Mr. Speaker, would understand very well, a discipline called strategy, Mr. Speaker. Whether this strategy is being drawn for political science needs, Mr. Speaker, or whether it is a marketing strategy in the field of the arts, whether in the sciences or in the arts, strategy as a discipline is actually borrowed from the military, Mr. Speaker. The military has made contribution beyond securing volatile areas In the area of research, Mr. Speaker, research in places where the military is well developed, giving an example of jurisdictions like America, the military contributes heavily into the research that goes into anything that you can imagine, all the way from medicine to technology in construction and beyond, Mr. Speaker. So the military as is a unit of society that gives contribution beyond their core duty, and as such, I do want to support this bill because it is a bill that seeks to improve the welfare and secure this welfare of our veterans. Mr. Speaker, I stand here to celebrate that there is a need to secure these veterans. And this bill is offering an opportunity for this country to offer some good health benefits, Mr. Speaker, to veterans who have served in our military. It is giving an opportunity to give these, to secure their health, as Daktari has said, not only for their physical bodies, but even in issues of mental health, Mr. Speaker. I want to celebrate that this bill seeks to ensure that people who leave service, Mr. Speaker, are going to have meaningful engagement after service, Mr. Speaker. I want to celebrate also, Mr. Speaker, that this bill identifies the dependents of the people in service and realizes that these are the dependents are going to be depending on officers even beyond when they have served, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that it was a good idea that we were able to put in this new body in the name of the Military Council because, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the big things that I'm celebrating in this bill. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that this Military Council shall be tasked with the duty of formulating policies that secure all the things that I have said in my foregoing contribution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I celebrate the idea of having a Defense Forces retirement home as has been stipulated in this bill. Mr. Speaker, without taking much time, I would just want to make a contribution on a build that I think would also be important on this bill, and I shall be bringing this in the third reading, Mr. Speaker, hoping that I shall get the assistance of people who understand this field so that we can be able to celebrate veterans beyond the military boundaries, Mr. Speaker. The military in Kenya has instituted ways of decorating servicemen who serve with honor and dignity, Mr. Speaker. However, this decoration only lives within the boundaries of the military camps, the barracks, and so on, Mr. Speaker. That we as civilians out here never quite celebrate our military. Mr. Speaker, the build that I shall be seeking to put onto this bill is that as we are building the new Hall of Fame at the Uhuru Gardens, Mr. Speaker, we can have the military celebrated beyond the boundaries of the barracks and have civilians recognize some of the veterans who have served this country in an exceptional way. Mr. Speaker, I want to single out the case of General Mahmoud, for example. General Mahmoud in the military circles is understood as a man who changed the course of history in this country on that fateful day of August 1, 1982. However, Mr. Speaker, beyond the military recognition that he got, very little is said outside here in the civilian circles, Mr. Speaker. So I do believe that in the third reading, I shall be able to formulate a build that will identify heroes who have gone beyond the call of duty and served beyond what is required of them in service so that they can be celebrated when we put up these Heroes Hall of Fame at Uhuru Gardens, Mr. Speaker. In totality, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is a magnificent bill and I do support. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Memusi, member for Kajiado Central.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, let me join my colleagues in support of this Veterans Bill. And Honorable Speaker, let me start by saying that this House has passed very important legislation for this country. But Honorable Speaker, to me, this is legislation that stands out. Why do I say this is legislation that stands out? Honorable Speaker, this is a legislation that seeks to celebrate those who've served this country. And Honorable Speaker, as a country, we have a tradition of celebrating those who've done well for this country only when they are no more. So, Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this bill. And let me state the following, that we can all contribute and state the many sacrifices and achievements that our military have made. But Honorable Speaker, to me, I would look at the small things that this bill seeks to bring. Honorable Speaker, in retirement, there are small things that are really important. My colleagues have talked about medical. Honorable Speaker, this is something that when one retires, they really need to be taken care. Medical, Honorable Speaker, is one of the things that is in this bill. And also, Honorable Speaker, we also have small things like free parking, which my chair had stated here. These are small things that really go a long way. Honorable Speaker, we have a card that military officers can show in their retirement. Honorable Speaker, these to me are very small things, but they're the small things that matter in retirement. Honorable Speaker, our military, I happen to have served in the Defense Committee for 2 terms now. I served in the 11th Parliament, and I'm still serving in this Parliament. I've had a close interaction with our military, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, when people say that we are going to militarize institutions in this country, and they say it as a criticism, Honorable Speaker, I would say if it is possible, let us militarize all our institutions, because these people have shown exemplary performance in every task that they've been given. My chair had talked about KMC, for example. KMC is an institution that had gone to the dogs. It had gone dead. But Honorable Speaker, when this institution was handed over to the military, they've revamped it. It is now serving us. And coming from a pastoralist community, I know that this is an institution that will uplift the livelihoods of our people. Honorable Speaker, when young people join the military, it starts as a job. But when they get into it, they realize that this is not just a job. Because most of us, when we are seeking jobs, the things that we think of is comfort, the things that we think of is financial gain. But in the military, Honorable Speaker, you forget about these things. You forget about your comfort, you forget about remuneration that you think will make your life better. It ends up being a sacrifice. Honorable Speaker, there's a lot we can say about our veterans. There's a lot we can say about our military and the sacrifice that they go through. But Honorable Speaker, let me say that I stand to support, and I thank the Leader of Majority for bringing this bill. We've gone through it as a committee, and we also thank our military for the valuable contribution that they gave when we were looking at this bill. So with those few comments, I rise to support. I thank you.
There being no other interest to speak on this, Honorable Majority Leader, you may reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, again, I'm a very excited person today, because even as Honorable Kanoraso was making his contribution, he actually did remind me of my own connections with the military. That he talked of a ship that was, destroyed in 1942 And I know that on the 12th of February, 1944, there was a ship had sailed from Mombasa to near the Maldives on the way to Colombo then, which is now Sri Lanka. And this ship was carrying 1,511, passengers on board, including just about 1,000 Africans who had just been taken from the King's African Rifles. The ship was called the Hedive Ismail. And this ship was then torpedoed by the Japanese at 2:30 p.m. Now, I'm quoting those details because they were written by my father, who was one of the 207 survivors out of the 1,511 who were on that ship. And then he proceeded to go on to fight in Burma and India and came back. So perhaps I would know if the Japanese, if he had not survived, I would not be here, or I've been here in a different form. Courtesy of my mother, probably would have moved on to somewhere else. But he was, and she waited for him to come back from the war. And then I think they then got married after the war, and the families were started. But it just remind you of the several stories he used to tell us about what service in the army, and he passed on in 2011. God rest his soul in peace. But it's that respect for people in the military started from that point. And even when I was told to move this bill by the people in the forces and those who have been calling, they were like, we hope we'll get this bill passed before you go on recess. And I'm so glad today that we are at this point where we moved the bill, and I'm now replying, and I do hope by next week or week thereafter, we should be able to have this bill finally processed and on its way to His Excellency the President for assent, so that the 12th Parliament can give this group of Kenyans the right protection that they need and the motivation to even serve this country, knowing that even when you retire, your country will take care of you as much as you have taken care of your country. Thank you very much, members, Honorable Speaker, for those who have contributed, and many special thanks to the committee for the time they put in this. And with those remarks, I beg to reply.
We shall also not put question on that. We shall do that in a subsequent time. Let us proceed to the next order.
Order number 13, the Prompt Payment Bill, Senate Bill number 16 of 2021, second reading.
Honorable members, we got a note from the chair of that committee, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. I'm told they are actually working on the finance bill. So we shall defer that particular agenda. Next order.
Order number 14, the Startup Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2021, second reading.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation. Member for Embu, are you the chair?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to request for postponement of this second reading because this startup bill was a Senate bill and was published on the 9th of February 2021 and passed by the Senate on the 3rd of December 2021. The principal objective of the bill was to provide a framework for entrepreneurship and be able to tap on the talents in Kenya and also on the capital.
So,
Honorable Speaker.
So, Chair, are you moving or you are seeking deferment? I heard you saying you are seeking deferment.
I'm requesting for deferment. I just wanted to explain why we are deferring. Because,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, just for record, yeah. Please
yes.
proceed.
Yes, we had considered the bill as a committee, but there were issues that came after we did the public participation. We got comments from the National Gender and Equality Commission, and we haven't been able to process that, Honorable Speaker, and we are considering that if you allow for more time, we shall be able to conclude and table our report on the same. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Fair enough. That agenda is deferred. Next order.
Order number 15, the Mung Beans Bill, Senate Bill number 9 of 2020, second reading.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock. Majority Leader, you seem to have a word, you don't. Okay, the chair isn't here, and he hasn't said where he is, so we shall defer that agenda. Next order.
Order number 16, the County Boundaries Bill, Senate Bill number 20 of 2021, second reading.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Committee Justice and Legal Affairs. That chair isn't there as well. So, yes. Yes, what is it, KJ? You have something to say on that. Are you moving?
No, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to bring it to the attention of the House that the committee is still considering this bill, and I do believe that if it is given consideration for a later time, it would be good, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. So that is deferred. Honorable members, there being no other business, the time being 6:13 p.m., this House started adjourned until Wednesday, 11th May 2022 at 9:30 a.m.